Well, hello there. This is Kevin again with Custom Micro, and I promised you a build video, actually building this all-flash server, and so we're going to give this a try. And again, we're recording in a new location, and so hopefully the technology will work out. And so if there's any audio issues or you're having any trouble seeing anything, you can leave a comment. If you enjoy these kind of videos, we can make more of them. This is probably the easiest way for me to make a video. I don't have to get too heavy into editing, or a colleague of mine who's been helping edit some of those videos from a year ago. But, you know, glad to take you along for the ride. So without further ado, we're going to start building the server. And in order to do that, first thing we got to do is take the lid off. So there are 4 screws we're going to take off here. And then we'll switch the camera angle and you can see the inside of the chassis. And so we're going to remove these screws. And I'm just going to kind of talk as we do this together. And it might be a little bit noisy. Apologize for that. It's just an old plastic table. So okay, so take the lid off. It has this tape that'll peel off when you're done. So if you like to peel things off, you'll get to enjoy that. Inside the box is all the goodies, mainly just screws for the standoffs for the motherboard and things like that. And let's give this other camera angle a try and see how that goes. Hey, that's not too bad. So there you can see inside the chassis. And we basically have drive bays here. These 2 bays here, because they're close to where the motherboard will be, you can only put 1 drive. If you had like a 3.5-inch hard drive, you can only put 1 drive in each one of these. You can put 2 drives, 2 3.5-inch hard drives, if you need to here. What we're going to do before we do anything else is we're going to take the front panel off this, because we're going to replace these 3 stock 80mm fans with 3 Noctua PWM fans. And so unfortunately that's kind of maybe the boring part, but again, I'm taking along for the ride, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to spin this around and try not to make a lot of noise again. And then in order to take this off, it's kind of interesting. There's quite a number of screws we have to take out. There's actually even some screws in the bottom of this case. So I'm going to set it up on its end here. And let's see, I'm not even going to switch the camera angle for now because it wouldn't be a very good view. So looks like there are 3 screws on the bottom that need to come off in order to take the front panel off. So we're going to do that now. And then we have some screws where the rack ears are on this. We have to remove those screws. And then once we do that, this front panel should come right off. Again, you won't have to mess with this or do this if you choose to use the stock fans. But as I mentioned in the video where I explained the materials I chose for this build, and I mentioned that because these fans that come stock do not have a 4-pin connector, they just have a standard 4-pin Molex to plug straight into the power supply, that you'll not be able to have any control over fan speed unless you had some kind of an actual fan controller, which that would cost more money and be a hassle. So rack ears are off, and now this front panel should slide right off there. The only thing you want to be careful with, and I'll show you this, let's go ahead and switch over there. I need to get me a Stream Deck so I can more easily switch. I have one where my day job is, but I'm going to go ahead and slide this out carefully. Again, just being careful with the front panel connectors, the front panel USB. I want to make sure. So there is, and it's going to be kind of hard to show you this, but there is actually a little bit of a foam filter here. So for these 3 80mm fans drawing air into the chassis. There will be some filtering there, so it should help keep things clean. So I'm glad that they did that. I'm going to set that aside for a moment. And now, if I can turn this and you can see it close up, there are basically screws holding those fans in place. And so we're going to remove those fan screws for all 3 of those 80mm fans, and just going to work on that. Hope you all had a good day today. You might have caught a little Easter egg. I mentioned my day job. Custom Micro is kind of my freelance side job, but I'm very busy with it. Have a number of small businesses that I support, and I've been doing IT work for a living for a little over 20 years now, about 21 years, and it was a hobby for a lot longer than that. And so sometimes I just have to make these videos when I can. And if it means it's 10 o'clock at night, I don't know, your mileage may vary depending on where you're at. And I am tired after a long day, but again, this has to get done. Need to get this deployed. Should have already had this deployed. It's difficult to juggle everything, but the businesses I do work for are understanding. They're accommodating because I give them a very good price for my work, and in turn they are understanding that I do have a day job. So if you're interested in how that can work out for you, if you've been kind of like always had a love for technology and a knack for it, and maybe want to have your own business, I would encourage you to, once you get your skill set built up, that you look into doing work for small and medium businesses. If you do work for your neighbor and your friend and your parents and or family, I should say, what you're going to find is you fix the computer and you may not see them for a long time. But if you can do work for businesses, you'll have repeat work. What I do is I put the businesses on a monthly retainer, so they pay me a flat fee every month, and that kind of comes with a bucket of hours that I'll do work. And sometimes I do a lot of work and they get a really, really good deal, and sometimes things are not as hectic, and so I do okay those months. I definitely, this is, if this was my sole source of income, I would definitely have to be charge more and be more aggressive in those areas, but because it's not, I can be a little more lenient. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over here and show you, because I'm not going to need these 2 hard drive trays or caddies or whatever you want to call them. I'm going to remove those just so we have optimal airflow. They really don't, as far as I can tell, add much of any rigidity to the actual case, so they're not really structural in nature. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those. And then I'm going to turn this last one here at a 90-degree angle in order to have things out of the way. If you watched the previous video when I talked about all the materials I chose for the build, you may know and may recall that I mentioned that the 2 drives that go in this bay are SATA drives. They're 8 terabyte Samsung QVO, and they're mainly just for backup storage. They're not going to be for production stuff, really. And these, I will say, just if you buy this rose wheel case, and I'll try to update the video whenever I post it or whenever I'm done with the live stream, and try to put a link to the different components that I chose. I did show in the previous video, if I had a screenshot or basically pulled up the website for all the different components I chose, so you can go back and watch that if you'd like, and that might be the best thing to do. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and again take this caddy out as well, so we can turn this at an angle. There's standoffs on the actual chassis to allow you to do that, so you can turn this at an angle if you'd like to. Now, before I actually put this caddy back in, I'm going to go ahead and mount the fans, because it's very tight squeeze getting these fans in, the new fans, and so the more room I have available, the merrier. So got a nice empty area, just got a clean slate, if you will. And so now I'm going to go ahead and grab the new fans. So we switch over here. I mentioned that we're using these Noctua 80mm fans. These are the NF-A8. They're PWM fans, so they have the 4-pin connector, and they can be controlled if your motherboard has a fan controller kind of built in, and this one does, this ASRock rack server board that I chose. Again, if you're more interested in the components and why I chose them, please watch the previous video that I posted about that. And so one thing that we are going to do to help with noise, because again, if you've watched that video, you know that I'm a big proponent of silent or very quiet PCs, including servers. And so, and it's funny I say that when my laptop over here is screaming at me. But I'm going to go ahead and, instead of using the actual fan screws that came with those factory fans, I'm going to use the little rubber standoffs that come with these Noctua fans. You always want to make sure in this situation, we want to make sure that the air is going to blow into the case. And the way you can easily tell on a fan, I'm going to switch to the other camera so you can see this. It's very easy. If you look where the frame is, and usually the label will be there where the frame is, you'll see the wiring for the fan coming in. That's where the actual motor is under here. So where you see the frame on one side, that's the air is blowing toward that frame in most cases. Now if you do something weird like get your voltage or your power reversed or something, you may have some issues there and it could turn a different way. But yeah, you can pretty much, general rule of thumb, your air is going to flow toward this frame on this one side of the fan where the label is. And so you can see these are the new Noctua fans in comparison with these factory fans that came with the case. I can't really speak much to how loud or how quiet they are because this is the third of 3 servers I built to this exact same specification, and I yanked these out immediately, and I hadn't even tested them out, plugged them into a power supply to see how loud they are. Looks like the brand is BOK. It's a brushless DC fan, and it's 12 volt, 0.1 amp, and it's 2,000 RPM. So being that it's 2,000 RPM, it's probably relatively quiet, but these Noctua fans will be extremely quiet. Now, because I want to have good cable management, I'm going to mount this fan where the power cable is right here at the bottom of the chassis. And again, I mentioned I'm going to leave that hard drive tray out until I get the fans mounted. Now, this may be one of the more grueling parts that you'll see because we're going to actually, you can see down here in the corner that I'm going to be pulling these little rubber grommets through, because this is how we're going to mount the fan. And go ahead and get these all through here, and then may have to sneak over here and see if I have some needle nose pliers handy. I may have put them up, may have to run off during the live stream if I need some. I may need some needle nose pliers to get these all in, and if I do, I may just go to the standby screen. I know you'll enjoy that. If you started watching at the very beginning, we had some wonderful royalty-free music playing. So again, it's pretty tight in here. It's not going to be easy, but all you do is you line the fan up and you pull the little kind of rubber grommet thing through, and you can kind of feel a little click, if you will, and then you know that you're in there. The ones that are more difficult to get through are the ones at the bottom, to get those pulled through. And these things are pretty tough and they're pretty flexible. So it's difficult to break them, but you can technically break them if you pull too hard. And again, I'm not sure, I would have swore I left some needle nose pliers in here, but I don't see them. So it's a little frustrating. But hey, that's the nature of the job, right? And but let's see, I'll give it another try to see if I can get this pulled through here without some pliers, and I probably cannot. You got to have the right tool for the job. The best tool to hammer a nail is a hammer, but if you don't, you can hammer a nail with a rock, but it's not fun. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run out and grab some needle nose pliers. Probably have to go all the way out to my vehicle to do that. So, let's see. We'll check and see if anybody's watching via live stream right now. And does not look like we have any concurrent viewers. So, I'm going to go ahead and just switch to our standby screen. And then I'm going to put on some music for you as I run out and grab some needle nose pliers. And I'll be right back. Okay, we are back. Let me get this music stopped. I know you can't hear it, but I can. So, sorry I had to kind of run off and leave you, but I had to get some needle nose pliers, and unfortunately I did not find the pair that I really wanted, but these should still work. So if you missed the dilemma, basically in putting the new fans in, these new Noctua fans, I want to use the little rubber grommets that come with these fans, and it's very difficult to get to them down here on these bottom corners, so I needed something to be able to give me some more leverage, to be able to pull these in here and get those connected. Again, I mentioned that these little rubber grommets are very tough. You're probably not going to break them, but it is possible. I have pulled one and broke it before, so when you kind of feel that little snap that you know it went through, then you just want to stop at that point. And so, again, it's been, get you there a little bit closer. It was just difficult to get all the way down here in these corners to grab those little rubber grommets. So, okay, well, one fan mounted, two more to go. Again, if you were hoping for a short video, I usually take my time when I'm building things like this, and I don't get in a hurry and I don't rush. I'd rather it be quality than quantity, I guess you'd say. And so, first fan down. We could chunk that box out of the way. Grab the next fan. Again, we're not at the fun part yet. After I get these three fans mounted, we got to put the front panel back on. Once we get the front panel back on, we can mount the motherboard if we want to. By the way, if you're not familiar with this, Noctua fans come with some cool little things, some little adapters and cables and such. So let's see, this one here I believe is just the extension cable. So if the factory cable, the 4-pin cable that comes with the fan is too short, you can extend that by several inches. Then also you've got the Y cable, so if you want to run two fans off one 4-pin on the motherboard, you can run two fans off that same 4-pin. Just keep in mind that does increase the load on that port, but also those fans are going to basically be running at the same RPM. You know, on basically the curve the motherboard is set to, as far as throttling the fan speed up and down, those fans will spin at the same RPM. And then finally, there's a low noise adapter. Basically just has a little inline resistor, and if you really want a super quiet system and you want to reduce the RPM of this fan, and maybe in a situation where you don't have the ability through the motherboard to basically have the variable fan speeds, you can put this low noise adapter in. You're going to reduce your RPMs, reduce your CFMs, the amount of airflow, but it will be a little bit quieter. But these fans are already so quiet, and they're going in a rack mount cabinet, wall mount cabinet, so I don't need those. But what I do need out of the box is I do need the little rubber grommets. And so again, we're using those instead of the normal fan screws, just for a little more dampening for the sound and all those kind of things. Again, we want to put these fans where the air is going to blow into the case. You don't want to get all the way to the place where you've got all these mounted and then you realize that you messed up and you put a fan in backwards, and then you got to take everything out to get it the way it needs to be. So again, this is not anything very exciting, and I know the camera angle is not the absolute best, but that's probably about as good as we're going to get. And we're going to go ahead and put these through, and then we're going to go ahead and get those connected. So some colleagues of mine, we were talking about, or actually texting about kind of everybody's first computer, and I'd be curious to hear about your first computer. And so if you, maybe the first computer you owned or the first computer that you custom built, I'd love to hear about what it was. I bet you remember everything about the specifications. You probably remember how much it cost and all those kind of things. So I would just love to hear about that. While I'm mounting this fan and I'm pulling on these little grommets here, my first computer was actually purchased by my parents when I was about, I don't know for sure if they bought it when I was about 12 or so. I will say that it was a very low-end computer for the time, but it was still really expensive. So the first computer that I had was a Packard Bell. It was a desktop style, so it actually was kind of more like the server chassis, like a 2U server chassis in size. It sat flat on the desktop. It wasn't a tower style. And it had a 25 megahertz processor. Yes, that's not a mistake. That's not a typo, if you will. 25 megahertz, not gigahertz, not even 100 megahertz, but 25 megahertz. To make matters worse, it was an Intel SX 25 megahertz. The SX processor did not have the math coprocessor, which was important for certain types of things, and so it was a very, I guess you'd say, crippled processor. And even though it was a 486, there was a lot of 386s that would have been a lot faster. Maybe some that had maybe a 66 megahertz processor, or certainly any that had a math coprocessor on there. That was the DX series of Intel chips at that time that had the math coprocessor. So, of course, all those kind of things, instruction set and such, is all just baked into all the processors now. There's not really... I know that they're still doing some things similar to that with AMD doing their 3D V-cache. You can get their processors, some models with the 3D V-cache, some without. If you're curious about why I chose the AMD Ryzen, and I'll switch back over here and talk a little bit, but if you're curious about why I chose the AMD Ryzen 7950X and not the X3D, I mentioned that in the previous video. It's because the 3D V-cache is only on one of the CCUs, it's a chiplet design, so one of the basically dies that has the 8 cores, and then the other die has the other 8 cores. In that chiplet design, they only put the 3D V-cache on one of those, and because of that, you kind of get some weird stuff. The actual operating system, the scheduler there's a special driver that has to be installed and all kinds of things, so it knows when it should be using one and the other. In fact, the whole idea is with the special driver from AMD, if you're gaming, if it detects that, it's supposed to completely turn off the CCU that does not have the 3D V-cache, so you're losing half your cores. And this is going to be a virtualized server, so I wanted all the cores and I wanted them to all have similar performance. And so instead of going with the 3D V-cache model, I went with the normal 7950X. It does have a higher TDP, so it runs a little warmer, but that's something I was willing to live with. So second fan in, one more fan to go. Again, you might say I could have had all those fans in 10 minutes, and sure, why not? But again, I just taking my time, making sure I'm doing it right, and it's kind of hard to do this and talk at the same time. So it's probably like walking and chewing gum. It's not easy to do. And so I really have, I guess back to my first computer, the Packard Bell 486 25 megahertz SX Intel chip. That first computer had 4 megabytes of memory. You heard me right, that's not gigabytes, 4 megabytes of memory. And it had a 200 megabyte hard drive. Again, not gigabyte, not terabyte, a 200 megabyte hard drive. And so I know that that's kind of maybe hard for some people to believe, because it's, it's just kind of so different from the world we live in now. Those computers were very limited on what they could do. I also kind of went back and kind of had a little nostalgia last night. I found a YouTube video where they were talking about the original Sim City. That was one of the first computer PC games that I played way back when I was, I believe, in the 7th grade. We had a special, if you weren't in band and didn't play an instrument, you got to basically have this cool little kind of like shop class, but we did a lot more than just woodworking and things. We actually worked with pneumatics. We had all kinds of little things that we did, little projects that we did. It was pretty cool. We had a little sound studio where we actually, like a recording studio, and you can learn broadcast and those kind of things. But we had a computer, and it had 2 games. Well, it technically had 3. I don't think one of them was for learning purposes, but we had Flight Simulator. I don't know which version of Flight Simulator it was, one of the very earliest ones. And then also, we had the original SimCity. And that original SimCity was a really fun game. I really enjoyed that. And I believe it would have ran on my Packard Bell 486, but I feel like, kids today, they get whatever games they want to get. And I remember, I just felt like from a financial standpoint, we just didn't have a lot of money. When I had my Nintendo, I think I always had the same 4 or 5 games the entire time I owned my Nintendo. It wasn't like I had even 10 games. I certainly didn't have 20 or more games. And so you kind of just played the games that you had, and you didn't really ask your parents for stuff as much. And you just kind of lived within your means, I guess. But yeah, I would have loved to have SimCity at home. I loved playing it at school. And then the other game that we had, which was not a learning game, if you will, is we had Wolfenstein 3D. And so if you don't know what that is, go look that up. It was the precursor to Doom. Everybody knows Doom, and it's kind of like become the de facto standard of what can it run, can that particular, can Doom run on that device? Can it run on that pregnancy test, or can it run on that, Canon printer, or whatever situation you're looking at there. But the direct, I'd almost call it a direct precursor to that was indeed Wolfenstein 3D. It's a pretty interesting first-person shooter kind of game. And we had that on that computer there in our shop class. So pretty interesting. And but my first computer came with DOS 6.0, I believe. It wasn't 6.22. I think that was the final DOS version back in those days. And I know I'm kind of just rambling a little bit. It's in part because this last fan is going to be very difficult to get this. I've got all the rubber grommets through there, and everything is tight and looking good, but this one right here is going to be very difficult to get to. So you can just watch me struggle for a little while, and probably make you anxious, as it makes me a little anxious with knowing that there may be some folks watching. If you're not watching it live, you may watch it later. So I'm going to turn the case around this way, and I was looking at the other camera. You really wouldn't be able to see anything, so I'm just going to leave it on this view. And I'll see if maybe from this angle I can get a grip on that little rubber grommet. Maybe if I use a screwdriver and move it over, I can grab a hold of it or something. So we'll see if I can get this going here. It looks like this other grommet came out. Just not had that one pulled tight enough. Or maybe I didn't have it in there at all, because those two are kind of pulling out. So I'm going to try to focus on the one on the bottom right now. If I can get it, the other one on the top will be easy peasy. I can take this entire plate off, and you know what? I think I'm just going to do that. So to kind of reduce my stress a little bit, I'm just going to switch over here, and basically what I'm going to do, and I don't know if the camera will pick up on it or not, but along the bottom edge here, there are 3 screws. If I take those out, this entire plate that holds those fans will come off. And then I can definitely get to that rubber grommet then. So could have done that from the beginning, and I guess maybe I should have. It might have made things a little easier. But I was trying to avoid taking more of this chassis apart than I absolutely had to. But there we go. Put this down flat again. Now you can see I have the fans completely out. They're on this little metal plate. And now I can definitely easily get to these grommets and get those pulled through with these needle nose pliers and get them tightened up here. Again, you can pull. You don't have to be too ginger with them, too easy with them. They've got a lot of flex, and it's not easy to break them really. So just make sure that they are all the way through. You want them to, be nice and tight. You don't want to be having a problem with that later. You don't want it coming loose. It's not like a screw. It's would be very hard to tighten these up after the fact. Once you've got your motherboard in, once this thing's in a production environment, it would be difficult to do. Alright, and I'll double check these others. Make sure, I think this one's not through. You gotta be careful with these cases. Sometimes they have some sharp edges. This one's not too bad, but it is possible to kind of get a hold of a sharp edge if you're not careful. So let's kind of watch out for that. Okay, just double check this other fan while I'm at it to make sure everything's good on it. And again, I know this is not the best videography you've ever seen in your life, but that's okay. And I don't want to ramble either, but I know silence is probably not what you'd like either. Alright, there we go. So those two fans are mounted well on that metal plate. Now it's time to get the metal plate back in the case. So let's do that. And again, I'm going to switch over here to the better camera angle probably for that, so you won't be having to I would say if you have the ability to use a screwdriver with a magnetic tip, that would be a wise thing to do. Kind of makes this whole process a little bit less, a little less painful. And go ahead and get that screw started. I usually, when I'm mounting something, I'll usually get all the screws started, and then once all of them are started, and maybe about 3/4 or maybe even 90% of the way in, then I'll go and cinch them all down. That usually just helps make sure everything is lined up good and you're not going to have any problems. You definitely want to make sure these things are lined up. There's not a lot of grace and wiggle room in these cases for that front panel to go on and things like that. You could have something sticking out a little bit in the way there. So it's going to go ahead and tighten these down. They weren't very tight to begin with. It wasn't like you don't have to use any kind of excessive force. Although I am known to tighten things down too much. I have to keep myself in check all the time that I don't just crank down on something. Okay, I'll go ahead and check these other two screws in this last fan on its little plate. It has its own little plate down there. Okay, fans are in. Terrific. Very glad for that. Turn this back around so you can see, and you'll see why I chose where these go. All fans are facing in, so we're good there. Don't have any problems there. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is mount the motherboard. And there's little particles there, just little dust or things. But the standoffs are already on the chassis, so we don't have to add the standoffs. They already line up properly for this micro ATX motherboard. We will be taking out one of these blanks out of the back at some point, because we're going to be adding that bifurcated riser card for those NVMe drives. And again, if you want more information about that, you can watch the previous video where I talked about all the components I chose and why I chose them. And so I'm going to switch over here, and then I'm going to grab the motherboard. So I chose the it's an ASRock rack server board, and it's the B650D4U-2L2T/BCM. And so, again, this perfect board for this scenario, and it does support bifurcation. It uses that Zen 4 architecture, socket AM5, and so this was the best board I could get at the time. I mentioned in the other video that there is a variant to this board that has 25 gig transceiver ports, and I would have preferred to have that board that has the Broadcom 25 gig transceiver ports, but that board is still not actually available in the supply chain. It's still just a listing on ASRock Rack's website. If that's one thing I would, I guess I don't think I would complain, because I've always had good experience with ASRock Rack boards. But I would say that a lot of times the boards are announced and they're on their website, and then it's a long time before they're available to purchase anywhere. And even once they are available to purchase, then a lot of times there's very limited availability, and they're all gone before you know it. And so this is a little kind of sneak peek at the board here, and we'll switch over to the other camera, and you can kind of see what's going on as we install that. So there's foam all the way around the edges of this board to protect it. Normally, you know, I don't wear like an anti-static wrist strap when I'm installing PC components. I'm not saying you shouldn't. If you feel more comfortable doing that, by all means, do that. Now, one thing I was almost about to do, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, this is something that's very easy to forget. And I'm going to sneak it in here and you'll see it. The back plate. Do not forget to put the back plate in. Now, some of you who have only built gaming systems, you probably, a lot of motherboards now have the back plate already included. It's already installed. Most of the time, other motherboards do not have the back plate pre-installed. And so we'll need to do that. I'm going to take a little glance at the board here. I think some of these are going to have to be, this does have the VGA port and the and a COM port, a 9-pin serial port right here. Then I'm going to pop these little pieces out. And we'll get to a good stopping point here in a minute, and I'll tell you some more stories of days gone by in the PC world, and reminisce a little bit. This board, as the previous video I mentioned, it has dual 10 gig 10 base T Ethernet ports and dual 1 gig Ethernet ports. The 10 gig ports are from Broadcom, and then the 1 gig ports are from Intel. And so they do support all of your teaming type functionalities, LACP, and those kind of things if you need that. But I'm not going to be using that because we're going to be doing something different with storage. We're using Hyper-V as our hypervisor, and I know that's debatable, and I'll talk more about that maybe toward the later on in the video. But I chose that there's a reason I chose that. And so I'm going to do a little spot check here to make sure I get everything punched out that I need. I don't want to have to go back and do this again later. And so it looks like that's everything that's punched out for all the components on this. So I'm going to go ahead and just snap this in. It's very easy to do this. If you never built a PC, don't be afraid. Buy the components. You know, when you're young and broke, that's fine. Buy the motherboard and then buy the processor and then save up and buy the memory, and before you know it, you'll have everything you need to build a computer. Okay, so now that we have that in there, and by the way, I had this laying on the foam that it came in on my lap so I wouldn't be harming it in any way. It's kind of a little bit tricky because we want to get these ports underneath these little clips, but we also want to make sure we're not dragging the bottom of the board on anything, because you know these standoffs on the motherboard, you know, you don't want those pushing against something. Now I'm going to stand up here just to kind of get a better angle for myself so I can see better, because I'm not perfectly in line. There we go. There we go. So I don't know if you can see well from that angle, but got everything lined up, and everything is. One of the things you got to make sure on this one, you punch the little hole out for the BIOS reset. There's a CMOS or BIOS reset button that sticks out of the back, which is really handy. Right here you have the A-Speed chip. This is your out-of-band management chip, and this is kind of like your remote KVM, which I mentioned in the previous video. You don't want to ever basically build in my opinion, you shouldn't build a server that's going to be in a production environment without a out-of-band management chip. You'll be glad you did. And sometimes I'll go with a little mini PC in certain scenarios, but if I can, I will always, if a job calls for it, use it. And it's nice to be able to get in remotely and power the server on remotely, power it off remotely if it's blue screened, and reboot it. Those kind of things, it's a lifesaver. It's invaluable. And so I would encourage you to consider that. And that's why I went with this board, because it was the right platform, the socket AM5. I'm opening up the box that came with the motherboard because it has the screws in there. It has basically a manual, it has screws, and it has a little piezoelectric, basically speaker, little buzzer. Don't need to install it because if you look right here on the motherboard, it's got a twin brother right there. There's already a piezoelectric buzzer speaker on the motherboard, so we will not need this one. And so we're just going to set that aside. These are the screws that came with the system. And while I'm getting those screws out and getting ready, I'll switch back over. Definitely things can begin to get a little messy. I do have basically a silicon pad, like a work pad that I can use. But just for the sake of time and moving this along, I'm just going to go ahead and just throw some screws on the table, and we're going to go ahead and get started getting this in here. Like I mentioned before, I always want to get everything started, get these screws in about 90% of the way, and then once we get everything started and we get everything, make sure we got really good alignment and we're not have any issues there, then we'll cinch everything down. Sometimes I do use a ratcheting screwdriver. I have a ratcheting screwdriver. It's not an LTT screwdriver. Not to say I would be against that. They're just expensive. Right now I have an Amazon Basics ratcheting screwdriver. But this one is just funny enough, since we make a custom micro, we have reviewed a lot of FS switches. And if you haven't been out there, check out fs.com, the fiber store. They obviously are known for their transceivers and their equipment related to fiber optics, but they have an awesome selection of really affordable and really powerful network switches, all the way from data center switches, enterprise switches, power over Ethernet switches, and everything in between. Industrial switches for harsh, outdoor kind of like outdoor cabinet kind of environments, and everything in between. And they have switches that run on Broadcom chips. They have some that run on NVIDIA chips for the really awesome, super high-end data center switches. And they have some that run on like Realtek chips that are a little less expensive. Just about any kind of configuration you can think of, they've got. And so, it's really kind of a cool little place to go and check out. And I don't remember where I was going with that now. I had a reason I brought up FS, but needless to say, I've completely forgotten what that was. So let's go ahead and transition back over here. I guess it was a shameless plug for FS. They're not a sponsor, but have used a lot of their equipment, both at my day job and also for Custom Micro. And everything looks like the alignment is just spot on. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten these screws down. Sometimes I'll tweak the motherboard a little bit, one way or the other, but I mean, I can't see anything wrong with the alignment here, so I'm just going to go ahead and tighten these screws down. I know my hand's going to be in the way as I do that, but there's not really a particular pattern or anything as far as tightening these down goes. Just kind of, tighten them down snug. You don't have to, give it a full send. Although I've got a colleague, we always come up with little silly sayings. He says you never half send a full send. But I would just say, as the old adage goes, have you ever heard let a squealing pig go? When you hear your screw start to make a little squealing sound, it's time to stop tightening it down. But in fact, you want to stop before that. I'm going to go back around and check these, make sure they're all tight. You just want to be careful that your screwdriver does not slip off the screw and hit the motherboard. There's so many surface mounted components on these boards now that it would be really easy to break a little diode or something off the board if you're not careful. And of course, it's kind of hot in this room. Hands are getting a little bit sweaty, so I have to be very careful that I stay right on top of these screws and I don't slip off there. Well, that's it. Everything is tightened down good, and that was easy. Not too difficult. Just make sure you get the right thread pattern screw that comes with the chassis, and you'll be good to go. So there we go. There's our micro ATX board. It's a little bit easier now to see some of the components, as far as it has, 4 standard SATA ports. It has 4 DIMM slots for DDR5, 5600 megahertz. But in the previous video, we talked about really to get full speed on these socket AM5 AMD Ryzen Zen 4, because the integrated memory controller, you really only can use 2 sticks of RAM, 1 per channel. So this is dual channel memory, and or dual channel memory controller, and so we're going to have 2 memory sticks. If we filled all 4 slots, it would bump our speed down considerably. We have the 2 8-pin CPU connectors up here for 8-pin power. We have the normal ATX connector for the board here. We have our CMOS battery. We have, of course, our socket AM5. We have a 4X PCIe 5.0 slot, a 16X PCIe 5.0 slot, and a 1X PCIe 4.0. Then we have the M.2 slot right here, which is for NVMe solid state drives. It's at PCIe 4.0, I'm sorry, excuse me, PCIe 5.0 times 4x speed. And then, of course, there's a plethora of fan headers. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like that's it. So we've got 7 fan headers on the board. That's a great number of fan headers, especially since we only need 4. We got the 3 case fans, plus we'll have the CPU fan on the heat sink of the CPU. And so, yeah, we're going to take full advantage of this. We're going to pretty much be maxing out these PCI Express lanes with all these NVMe drives we're going to be putting in here with this bifurcated card that turns this 16X slot into 4 4X slots. And we're going to be definitely taking advantage of all the you're not going to leave much on the table. So at this time, now that we've got the motherboard installed, we got a few choices we can make, and I'm just going to switch over and we can talk about that a little bit. So at this point, we can put the processor in, we can install the memory, those kind of things. Some people like to install the processor and the memory with the motherboard outside of the case. Now, if this was a really deep, like say a desktop chassis, and we laid that desktop on its side, and it's going to be at least double the depth of this, it might make sense to mount your CPU and your memory on the board before you mount the board. In this case, it gives me a lot of stability. It gives me a good working platform to install that CPU and the memory. Another thing with the way that this case is laid out, another thing that's probably a good idea to do for sure before we put the heatsink on this CPU is to go ahead and get our power supply in, so we can get these 8-pin connectors and our ATX connector connected and get the cables ran along this bottom side here and down and around to where the power supply goes in this empty spot here. And so we had to that's when you're building a system, not every system is going to be the same. You can't necessarily always do things in the exact same order if you want good results. And so another thing to keep in mind, because of the Noctua cooler we're using, the heatsink for that cooler actually extends out above the memory modules. So if you were to put the CPU in, put your thermal paste on, mount your heatsink, if you did that before you installed your memory, you couldn't install the memory, and you had to take the heatsink back off to put the memory in. So, you just have to kind of think about those things. As far as the riser cards for the NVMe drives, we can add those at any time. As far as the little caddy for the SATA solid state drives, we can mount that really at any time. And the only thing that I will say, there's one screw, one mount right here that's really kind of hard to get to because this was originally kind of in this position, and the way I've done it on the other 2 servers is I've rotated this around at a 90-degree angle, and there's other posts here, if you will. There's other standoffs on the board, so you can actually mount this kind of over here out of the way. And but I have to have it out in order to mount the actual drives in there. And I do have a bracket for mounting those drives. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and get the the power supply installed so we can get these cables plugged in and routed around, so then we can get our memory installed, get our CPU in, put our heatsink on, and carry on from there. And, you know, and maybe while we're doing it, we can talk a little more about, you know, history of computers. I'm going to check our live stream just to see if anybody's left any comments or anything. It's always possible. Looks like nobody left a comment yet. I know earlier we did have some people watching from different periods of time here. Looks like we've had 4 people hop on during the live stream. And so, hey, that's better than no people. And so I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. And let me get a drink of water and we'll keep moving on. Okay. Again, your workplace can get a little messy if you're not careful. I've still got all these fans sitting over here. I may just go ahead and move those out of the way, set those over here. I got a whole bunch of screws all over the table and everything. So, you know, it's good to keep a good, clean workplace, but I know as you're building, you kind of end up just chunking things out of the way and keep moving along. All right, so let's open up this Seasonic power supply. I'm excited about getting that in because we'll be well on our way of getting done with this build. I know that people enjoy unboxing videos. Well, hey, in a sense, we're getting an unboxing video on steroids. We're unboxing all kinds of things. Although we didn't really take any time to really have any, I guess, I can't think. It's too late. It's hard to think when it's late at night, when you're just trying to talk to the camera and pretend like somebody's in here with you while you're working on all this. But there's no anticipation, I guess, no kind of reveal. Because earlier I just had the motherboard sitting in the case, and I'm doing the same thing with the power supply. So here we go, unboxed power supply. Picking it up by the plastic. But no, you definitely need to go back and watch the previous video because you'll learn about why I chose the components I chose. Of course, this is a Seasonic 650 watt focus. There is some tape you can peel off here, you know, and I know a lot of people love to peel off things like that. And some of this will be hard to do later, so I'm going to go ahead and peel it off now because I'll forget about it if I don't later, and then you'll have, you know, it'll be 10 years from now and it'll still be a sticker on there for somebody else to peel off. And so there's 2 places. One's on the fan, and then the other one's right here where you plug the power in. And I'm going to get both of those peeled off here. And yeah, Seasonic power supplies. This one has a 10-year warranty. It is platinum rated for efficiency. It is fully modular, and it has, you know, it should have rock solid stability. It is a hybrid model. So there's a button here on the back, which is different than your normal toggle button to turn the power supply on or off. This other button can run this power supply in a hybrid mode, which means it will only run the fan if it needs it. And I mentioned in the previous video, and I don't know, I guess I'm going to stop saying that because I've said that like a dozen times now. You're going to have to go back and watch the actual video where we talked about why we chose the components we chose. But at any rate, this when I was running Prime 95 on one of these servers, kind of doing a burn-in test on it, and I ran it for probably 15 minutes or longer, the fan on the power supply never kicked in. So this is an awesome, very efficient power supply. So what we're looking for now is, you know, the power supply comes with all these different bundles of cables, these harnesses, if you will. We definitely have to have that ATX connector for the motherboard. And, you know, again, we'll do the best cable management we can. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no clear side panel on this. This is a server chassis. It's going to go in a wall mount cabinet and hopefully serve this company for many, many years to come. So we got our ATX connector here. Set that aside. Now we're going to look for our 8-pin power connectors for the motherboard. This is a PCIe connector, looks like here. So we don't need that one. Another PCIe. Let's see what we got. Here's a CPU. And here's another CPU. They actually are labeled, so you don't have to guess. They actually say, I can switch over here, maybe you can see this. It actually says CPU. So it's actually 2 4-pin connectors that make up the 8-pin. And then on the other side, since it's fully modular, it says PSU for power supply. And that will plug in, and I'll scoot this up a little bit. Maybe you can see it if I turn a little bit of an angle here. It's a fully modular power supply. So you've got all these ports here to plug everything in. What's nice about it being fully modular is you only have to use the cables that you need, and so you don't clutter up your case and you get better airflow and those kind of things. I know the electrical engineers out there, I bumped the camera, sorry about that. The electrical engineers out there may complain and say, oh, you're not getting as good electrical integrity because it's modular and you got to plug on both ends, and it'd be better if it was soldered on the power supply side, and that, I believe that's probably very true. So it's kind of a trade-off you have to make. But most of your very high-end power supplies are going to be fully modular. So you might as well just get used to that. And again, it has its pros. Some people go all out and they buy custom cables that are braided and that look nicer. But you know, again, this is a server chassis, so we're gonna roll with what it came with. And these are kind of flat, and so they should do well. Just kind of double checking here to make sure I'm going to be able to get this plugged in without any problems. And again, my hand's going to be in the way a little bit. Apologize for that. We're going to basically get right here, and we're going to push that straight down. And you hear the little click, you're good. One thing I do like about the way they designed this motherboard, they put the power supply connector up here on this top edge by the DIMM slots, the memory slots, and there's actually a standoff on the motherboard here and here, so there's a lot of rigidity. There's a good solid structure as you plug that ATX connector in. I've seen some motherboards where the ATX connector is right between a couple of those standoffs, and there's a lot of flex when you try to press down on that ATX connector. So a lot of times I'll put my finger underneath the kind of the edge of the board to kind of give it a little bit of support there. In this case, it won't be necessary because there's 2 motherboard standoffs right there. I'm going to go ahead and get the other cable plugged in that says CPU. For the last, couple decades really, probably in the PC world, most motherboards have had at least a 4-pin connector to supply additional power to the processor, to the CPU. And then later they had an 8-pin connector. And now processors can draw enough amperage, enough power, that now there are a lot of the higher end motherboards have dual 8-pin connectors. So this board is no different. It has 2 8-pin power connectors just for the CPU itself. And again, I'm just going to work on getting that plugged in right now and focus on that. The lighting in this room is not the best, and I have not installed any additional lighting, and that would help with the video, and it would help with being able to see this port better, get everything lined up better. That's okay though, we'll get it. No big deal, just working under pressure, right? With a whole world, as in 4 people watching. I better be careful. Okay, so then we're going to try to kind of turn these cables and kind of put a little bit of a bend there, because we want these to work out to where we've got them coming through here in a flat of a way as we possibly can. We want to have these kind of flat as they go along over here to the motherboard. And so I'm going to go ahead and do the same with this one. Kind of turn it at an angle like this. You want to be careful not to put, too much pressure or to, where you would damage these cables. We're not trying to put like a real sharp angle on there. We're just trying to get it to where to lay down about as flat as it can so it's out of the way, doesn't want to obstruct airflow. Those kind of things is what we're looking for. We're not looking for anything more than that. So, again, we're just trying to get these to lay down pretty flat along the case here. And that'll be fine. And then these are going to have to turn and plug into the power supply back here, and we're going to leave those hanging there for a moment. Go ahead and get this ATX connector plugged in before we do that. So again, they put those standoffs there, and see, by doing these two 8-pin cables first, we're able to put the ATX connector in front of them. The benefit of that, of course, is it's going to allow those cables to run behind that and give us some good cable management without even having to have any zip ties. So I was able to plug that cable in without any issue. Very good snug fit, just because they put that right between those motherboard screws, those standoffs. Again, this will probably be one of the, I don't know if you say uglier little ways to cable manage. We've got to get this out of the way as best we can, and it'll kind of end up probably getting zip tied over here to this fan, or over here in this corner by this fan. Again, I try to be careful with these things. I don't want to put undue pressure on these kind of connectors to cause problems down the road. But we do need to have this down here where we can get it out of the way of the fans. We don't want this ATX cable to be up above the fans and impeding the airflow. Okay, so now that we got those ran over here, we can go ahead and get those plugged in. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the motherboard connector first. And I'm going to try to spin this around a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So, I kind of wish they wouldn't have these detached anymore like they do. Okay, so right here you see it says motherboard, and it's got on the power supply side a larger connector that goes here, and then there's a smaller connector that goes right beside it. I've not actually mounted the power supply in the case yet. It's still flexible. I can move it around, but we definitely need to get that secured here shortly. So there we go. The actual ATX connector for the motherboard is plugged in. And then we have our choice of where we plug in the CPU headers. We've got different peripherals, SATA and IDE, that can plug in here, and we have a plug in here and 3 more up here for our 8-pin connectors for the motherboard. And so we can plug one down here at the bottom if we want to, and then plug the rest up at the top. And there's a lot of varieties of how we could do this, and there's really no right or wrong way to do it. And what I am going to do, I'm going to go check the other server that I've already built. I got one more of them still here, and check and see how I plugged it in there. It really doesn't matter, but I'm just I'm not really too OCD, but just OCD enough that I'm going to check this out. So they all are matchy-matchy. They all kind of have the same way everything is connected in there. So it looks like that I did plug one of them in on the top and one on the bottom. So hopefully that wasn't too loud. I've got a lapel mic on, and so you might have heard that crash of that case a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and get the rest of these cables plugged in. We're going to plug this one in at the bottom down here. Nice little click. We go ahead and plug this one in above it right here. And here we go, a little click. And this should be out of the way good enough. And we'll find out here in a little bit if that worked out well. All right. Again, we're going to have to do something with this cable. I'm going to go ahead and grab a zip tie. I have no idea why, but on the other two cases, I grabbed this random little blue zip tie. So I'm going to dig through the zip tie container and see if I can fish out one of these little tiny blue ones. And again, for just keeping it all consistent. I know this is a little bit slow, and some of you said, well, I could have had a computer built already 3 times over. And that's fine, good for you, I guess. I just, I'm really kind of particular about how I do things, and I take my time, and so hopefully that doesn't irk you too much. So what I did on the other ones, I'm going to stand up here for just a moment, and I'll try to bring the angle of this back around. Maybe you can see this corner over here. What I did on the other case is I ran a zip tie through the corner of this fan, and I don't remember how hard that was because it's been a while since I've done that on the other 2 servers. So see if I can fish that zip tie through that hole this way. Probably going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. Here we go. Yeah, that's not going very well. Let's see if I can come from this direction and maybe be easier to hook it around. It's not a very big area to work with. It's kind of a tight, little bit of a cramped spot there. Get that cable out of the way. I think I've got the zip tie pulled through there enough. I think I should be able to get us going here. So I'm going to push this back down. Grab this zip tie. Oh man, the zip tie is backwards. Fun. Let's try that again. Again, don't get too frustrated if things don't go exactly the way you want them to when you're building a computer. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here and we can talk a little bit, because I know you probably don't want to see me struggle trying to get a zip tie in the corner of that fan. But, it's just, don't get frustrated if things take a little bit longer. It's better to take your time, slow down, do it right the first time. Again, when you don't want to have to take the whole thing apart because you forgot to do something. And I've been doing this long enough. That's happened to me, and I know it's happened to some of you out there. You get in a little bit of a hurry, and you're like, okay, I'm going to, I don't want to take too much time on this. And the next thing you know, you got a pretty big problem on your hands because you kind of got in a hurry. So, all right, here we go. Can I get this zip tie connected? I forgot how short these zip ties are, and that's going to be part of the problem. And then we got the cable for this fan kind of in the way too. See if I can bring it around this way. Maybe that'll be the best. It's definitely easier when you're not on camera, just for the record. Let's see if we can get this thing in here. Definitely easier when you're not on camera. I would love to hear about your first PC build, or your first PC that you owned. I haven't even got into the first PC I built yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. But let me see again. We got to get this zip tie in here, one way or another, or we're not going to move on to the next thing. So it's going to be persistent and be consistent. Okay, I think I've just about got it. Oh man, I messed up. Yep, I'm sure you're enjoying watching me struggle. So, I talked about the first computer I owned. Well, the first upgrade I ever did, this computer that I own, this Packer Bell 486 25 megahertz system, did not have a CD-ROM drive. It did not have a sound card, and everybody needs a sound card in their computer because you got to play games, and you don't want to play games without sound, and so definitely need a sound card. I mentioned that there's sharp edges on these. By the way, I just kind of cut my finger just a little bit on a sharp edge, but I think it just kind of shaved a little bit off there. Okay, there we go. All right, that was not fun. But now we have that cable is secured now. It's out of the way. It shouldn't impede that fan, and that's our goal, is to get some good airflow in there. So that worked. Hooray. Apologize for that delay. So my first upgrade I did on my computer, my Packer Bell, was I installed a sound card. It was a Sound Blaster 16. It was an ISA card. So for you young whippersnappers out there, long before PCIe, in other words, PCI Express slots, even before PCI slots, was the the ISA slot. There's also IDE slots. That's for hard drives. That's old hard drive slots or connectors. But it was the ISA slot. And there was two variants, at least in my generation. There was the 8-bit ISA slot and the 16-bit ISA slot. Well, the motherboard I had did have some 16-bit ISA slots, and so was able to slot in that Sound Blaster 16 sound card. One of the neatest things about it was it came with the drivers on a CD-ROM. Well, I mentioned earlier, my poor Packer Bell did not have a CD-ROM drive. It did have a 5 1/4 floppy drive and a 3 1/2 floppy drive, but no CD-ROM. So I contacted Creative Labs, called the number on the back of the box or in the manual, and told them my dilemma, and they sent me the drivers, 16 floppy disk drivers and software from Creative Labs for that Sound Blaster 16. So instead of having a CD I had that I could use, I had 16 floppy disk. So it took a little while, but that was back when things were a lot different when you installed things. So, okay, well, let me just pause there for a second so we keep moving along with this server build. I'm going to go ahead and just plug in this fan header since I'm right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and get that done so it's out of the way. And if I'm silent too long, I apologize. Again, I'm just trying to focus, make sure I do things the right way the first time. And then we could go ahead and plug in these fans as well if we'd like to. Probably run these underneath these other cables. And then pick our fan headers, any fan headers. Although, like I mentioned, I'm not sure which ones I chose on the other two that I built. And again, it doesn't have to be consistent in that area. This can always be changed later too. It's very easy to get to these fan headers, so that's not a big deal at all. And then just cable management and things like that are important. And I know that some people go to great lengths with cable management. My focus is just so we have good airflow. As long as I've got good airflow, I'm going to be happy. That's all I really am worried about. Okay. Little particles in there. I kind of clean those out as I go. Whether it's that skin from my finger or whether it's just some plastic from all this stuff that's in there. Okay. So, at this point, now that we've got we got our power supply cables in, they're nice and tight and plugged in good. Now we can go ahead and put our memory in, and then our CPU in, and then our heatsink. And also, at some point, we definitely got to get that front panel put back on. So we're still missing that. But I know that you don't really care about watching that. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll move on with the memory. Again, we did a weird thing. We used some Axiom memory. And I explained in the previous video why we did that. You have to go watch it. And I know you're curious. These are 48 gig sticks of RAM. Again, watch the other video. This is DDR5 5600. It is ECC unbuffered RAM. Again, this motherboard does not support registered DIMMs. You got to do unbuffered DIMMs, UDIMMs, if you will, not RDIMMs. And so you got to make sure you do that. Of course, my old eyes here. I mentioned in the previous video I thought these were probably Hynix sticks or chips. I'm sorry. I believe that's right. It's really hard to see, but kind of a newer density of memory when you have these ones that are 48 gig modules for a total of 96 gigs, so we don't lose any speed on our RAM slots or anything like that. Now, even though I'm pretty confident we're going to plug those sticks of RAM into the blue slots, we'll just open up our handy dandy quick start guide, and then I'll drop it on the floor, cheat sheet, which will tell us what we need to do. And so for the RAM, of course it's not going to tell us. It's probably in the actual motherboard manual. But we do see we have A2, A1, B2, B1. So yes, the blue slots are A1 and B1. That's what we want to do then. So I've already opened up. I'm going to switch over to the zoomed in view here. I already have the little levers pulled back. Got one stick of RAM opened up here. Make sure that you line everything up properly because there is, on all memory, there's a notch, whether you're talking DDR5 or the older DDR4 or even DDR3 or any generation of memory, there's a notch on the bottom here, and it has to be lined up properly. These sticks kind of sit tightly in there. So we're going to look and see, okay, our short end is over here on this side, and so we're going to go ahead and put this one in first since it's the farthest one back there, and it's kind of the one that's going to be the hardest to get to. Now it does take a little bit of pressure and some leverage to get these installed. Some people like to use their thumbs on both ends and press straight down. Some people will push in the middle. Kind of any of those will work. You just want to put a very uniform pressure on there. You don't want to press at an angle. You want to press straight down and give some uniform pressure. And when you hear those clicks or those slots, then you know you're in. And I usually just verify that. That one on the top there kind of clicked in a little bit as I pressed a little more on it. So I'm going to just kind of press down a little bit more here, make sure. Okay, that stick is in good. Again, you just want to make sure you're pressing straight down. That would be bad if you put a little bit of if you tweak that in any way. And now let's get our other stick of RAM in there. Never used 48 gig sticks of RAM until this build. Usually use 16 gig or 32 gig or some common size like that. But this job, to get the optimal performance and the maximum amount of density I could get out of this motherboard, that's what I went with. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and get lined up, make sure we're going straight down, and we're going to push straight down until we hear that click. Make sure it's in there, and then I'm going to go ahead and press down a little bit more, make sure we are all the way in. Okay, memory is installed. So now we can install our CPU. And I know that that's one of those that might be a little intimidating for some, so we'll walk through this together. It's not as difficult as it sounds. It's not as scary as it may seem to be. Okay, so this is our processor, the AMD Ryzen 7950X. We're going to have to open that up. You know, we're trying to build our channel, and we went for over a year. In fact, my colleague told me it was like 500 and something days without uploading a video. I really sincerely apologize for that. And I'm endeavoring to put out more content. So we had a video just a couple days ago, and here we are already with another video. And we want to put out some more diverse content. I love making the FS videos about the FS switches because those are kind of neat, unique, and I'm definitely a proponent for them. But also, you know, there's a lot of other cool technology, whether it's the mini PCs from Minis Forum, whether it's server builds like this, all flash server builds, and everything in between. There's a lot of things that we can work through, and we can talk about and do together. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up this CPU socket. I'm going to switch back over to the other view so you can kind of see that. I know this camera is not the best in the world, but it's getting the job done. And so we're going to go ahead. Everybody's got a difference of opinion about how to do this, but I'm going to go ahead. I like to go ahead and just open up the CPU socket. You just have to be very careful not to bend any of these pins. This is called a LAN grid array, LGA socket, which means the pins are on the motherboard and the pads are on the CPU. The previous generation AMD, which was socket AM4, it used a ZIF socket, zero insertion force socket, and the pins were on the CPU, and the motherboard had basically a hole that had a ZIF socket for those pins to go into. And so you have to be very careful with these LAN grid array, LGA, that you don't bend those pins, because if you do, you're going to have a bad day. Now, there's all kinds of things on here to help you make sure you put this on here the right way. On the CPU, there's a little arrow in the corner right here, and on the socket, there's an arrow in the corner. There's a notch on the CPU here and here, and there's notches on the socket here and here. And so it helps you make sure you line everything up correctly. So you're going to pick this chip up by the edge, and I'm going to kind of stand up here to make sure I can see better from a top-down view. And you're just going to go ahead and kind of set that in there nice and gently. Just kind of set it in there. And I kind of chunked it in there a little bit. And that's okay. That's gentle enough, I suspect. And just make sure it's in there good. Make sure it looks like it's centered in there. And there's a little tiny amount of wiggle room usually when you put them in there. That's normal. And then what you're going to do now is you're going to take and bring this part of the lid down and let it just kind of sit there and kind of centered on there. And then you're going to go ahead and ratchet this handle down, and when you do, it's going to put pressure on there, and you're going to be locked in. So that's how you do it, folks. That's how you mount a CPU and a socket AM5. It's that easy. Okay, so now we're going to put the heatsink on there. Where is my heatsink? Again, we're using this Noctua heatsink, and we talked about the reason we chose this particular one. I'll bring it on the camera here in just a moment here. In fact, I can switch over, and so you can see more of the mess, because here we are. I mentioned as we're building, we're just throwing things around, you know. All these, the containers, the memory came in, everything else, just sling it all over the place. And, you know, just doing what we can. I'll chunk that off in the floor and just get it out of the way. So we're not going to need all these power supply cables I got laying up here. We can probably start chunking some of those. Now we will need some of the SATA cables here in a little bit, and so we will need some of those. I'll put those over here. So I'll bring this out so you can see it. It comes in a, you know, this is kind of the box the heatsink comes in for protection. This is a very unique heatsink, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'm going to try to keep this plastic piece on here that kind of covers up the actual part that touches the heat spreader on the CPU. And there's a piece of cardboard here. You want to remove that, of course. Some of them have that, some of them, I'm not sure if all of them that I bought have that. Of course, the fan is in the orientation and it's blowing air up. And so this is a very unique design. I'm going to switch back over to the other camera. It's a very unique design in that it actually has the fan mounted underneath the heatsink, and so what it's doing is it's blowing air up through the heatsink, but you can get the maximum amount of, you know, basically this thing's only 70 millimeters tall, and so it barely fits in this 2U chassis with about 1 millimeter to spare when you put the lid on. So pretty cool, and it's basically the biggest heatsink I can cram in here. And so before we install it, there is something I want to do, and again, it's not necessary really, but I'm just kind of a stickler for those kind of things. I'm going to go ahead and take some Q-tips. In fact, I may run and grab some more because I don't have very many. And I'm going to just do a good clean on that heat spreader on the CPU and clean that the processor there. I say processor, I meant to say the heat sink. And just to make sure we got a good clean surface before we apply thermal paste. And so stand by for just a minute and I'll be right back with some more Q-tips. In fact, what I'll do is when I go get Q-tips, I'll do what we did earlier, and I'll bore you to tears with some music here. So, we'll be right back. And we're back. I'm going to mute this music so I don't hear it either. I'm kind of curious how long we've been live streaming. Let's take a little look-see here. I'm not sure if it's going to tell me. Okay, we've been live about 1 hour and 35 minutes. So we've been at this new server build about 1 hour and 35 minutes, and so, hey, not too shabby. Okay, so now we got our isopropyl alcohol, 91%. Some good strong stuff here, and we're going to put a little bit on some Q-tips. We're going to clean that that integrated heat spreader for the AMD Ryzen CPU, and then we're also going to clean the bottom of the heat sink where it touches that, and then we're going to get the thermal paste out, and we're going to put the exact perfect amount of thermal paste. And I stole that from a guy, I don't even know the name of his channel, but he does a lot of work on consoles and repairing those. And sometimes I'll take the cap off and put a little bit on there, but I'm just going to get a little bit crazy here and just pour that on there. Pay no attention to the fact some of it got on the table, but that's why you got a little microfiber cloth right here handy. And so I'll just keep that really close by. So I'm just going to go over this, and I guess we can switch to the other camera. And I'm just going over, again, I'm blocking part of that with my hand, but I'm just going through and kind of cleaning off any residue. Maybe there was some, oil from my hands when I was installing the CPU earlier. Again, I may be going way overboard. It may not be necessary to really do that, but that's just how I roll. I just want things to be as good as they can be. I want the optimal amount of heat transfer to be able to take place, and so I'm just going to clean that up really good. So a couple damp Q-tips. I'll use a dry one here. And these heat spreaders are kind of weird because they got kind of these notches in them. I find myself kind of getting hung up on those little notches a little bit. I don't really like that, but it is what it is. Just don't push too hard because, that thing's already ratcheted down there. Okay, that's good and clean. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with the actual heatsink. Get it cleaned up here. No, you can't see it. It's kind of off camera. Kind of bringing it off to the edge here. You can see it a little bit. I'm not going to move the camera though, because that'll just be more problems. That'll cause more problems than it'll help. There's definitely some fuzz and stuff on this heatsink, so I'm glad I'm going over this and cleaning it off. I'm just kind of using, these are definitely kind of like for me, like a one-use Q-tip. I'm just using, not even using both sides of it because I've got my hand on the other side a little bit, and again, I don't want any oils from my skin getting on any of this. I want it to be, again, maybe say it's OCD, maybe say it doesn't matter, but just want it to be a good clean surface, the best thermal conductivity we can get. And so for anybody out there who thinks that's crazy, well then I guess just rub your oily fingers all over your heat sink and do your thing. So okay, so we're going over this with a pretty damp one this time. Try and get those pieces of fuzz off there, and then we're going to go over it with a dry one. Again, there's definitely with some fuzz and stuff, probably from the cardboard when this was in the case. Okay. Got that cleaned up good. Now, one thing I probably should have done before I cleaned this up so good would have been to go ahead and put the mounts on there, because we haven't put the mounts on the motherboard yet. Because to use this NOC 2 heatsink, we've got some special mounts we need to use. But hopefully that'll stay clean. I put that over there out of the way a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and dab up this isopropyl alcohol off the table. Kind of dry that up a little bit. And then show you what I'm talking about. So on some motherboards you'll have to take the back plate off. There's kind of a tension mechanism on the back of the motherboard. There's a back plate, kind of a metal plate on the back. But on the socket AM5 you can just use the factory back plate. And what you'll do is you'll remove these two little tension or retention arms. See, it's talking about keeping things clean, and something fell off my hand. I think there's a little piece of rubber off one of those. NOC 2 little fan buddies. And so we'll get these 4 screws out for the factory heatsink little clamp mechanism. Once we've got that out, we'll grab our kit that came with this. And what I wanted to mention first is with socket AM5, you may want to, now with 2 out of the 3 kits that I bought of the NH-L12S NOC 2 heatsink cooler, it came with this special bracket. This is an offset bracket specifically for socket AM5 because the CCUs, which are the CPU cores, are offset. They're not in the center of the die. In fact, the integrated graphics chip is actually more in the center of the die. So this offset bracket moves the entire heatsink down a little bit so the center of the heatsink is more in direct contact with those CCUs, those actual cores. And so this is the NOC 2 at NM as in Nancy Mike dash AM B as in boy 14. And so you'll need this mounting bracket if you have this exact same heatsink. If you have a different NOC 2 heatsink, you may need a different bracket. I almost bought the wrong bracket. Now again, 2 out of the 3 NH-L12S heatsinks I bought already were, I guess, a little bit newer. They hadn't been sitting in the warehouse as long. They already had this offset bracket. I only had one of them missing the offset bracket. Kind of irked me a little bit at first, but that's just, you know, the nature of things, and your mileage may vary, and hopefully by the time you buy one, your offset bracket will be included. I did use the offset bracket on the first 2 that I installed, and so I decided I wanted to take the time to order the offset bracket for the 3rd one, and so that's what we're going to do. Now we'll also need these little gray standoffs. No, it's kind of hard to see those. And they come with their own screws. And we're going to put those on now. And of course, what did I do? I dropped a standoff and I dropped a screw. And of course, as we talked about earlier, I've just been chunking things in the floor, and so who knows where that screw went. Let's see. Yep, still missing a screw. Okay, And I'm not sure, there's the manual for it. I like to keep that handy to make sure I don't miss a step, even though I've already done this before and done a lot of heat sinks in my day. So, yeah, where did that other screw go? It just took off. So, fun, fun, fun. I'm going to leave the camera aimed where it is because I don't think anybody wants to see me digging around underneath the table looking for a missing screw. In fact, I'm going to move the chair and everything. Well, while we're talking, back to my very first upgrade I did to my very first computer, installing that Sound Blaster 16 ISA card. Another fun fact, that sound card had an IDE port on the back of it. So if your motherboard was limited on IDE ports and you did have something like a CD-ROM drive you wanted to install, you could actually plug it into your sound card and it would pass that through, and you would have that IDE connectivity coming off there. So, well, this is the weirdest thing. I don't know how I managed to drop a screw in such a way that I would lose it. Oh, I found it. It was actually on the table. How silly am I? All right. Hey, this is raw and real right now, folks. If you wanted something polished, if you wanted something edited, you turned to the wrong channel at the wrong time and the wrong night. Okay, so we got these little gray standoffs here, and then we're going to get those installed. And by the way, this motherboard manual here kind of explains how you do that, so kind of give you a little glance at it there. Tells you exactly what to do if you're using the offset bracket and everything. So very, very helpful. So because we are using the offset bracket, and based on our orientation, we're going to be using the larger bracket up here on the top of the CPU. We're going to use the smaller one down here. So you can just follow along with me here, and we'll see how this works. They even tell you for the offset what holes to use and everything. So all right. I'm just kind of getting things prepped off camera here a little bit. Apologize that you're not getting to see a lot of this, but I got to get the work done too, you know. It's not just about taking you along for the ride, although that's part of it. It's also getting the work done. I'm just going to get these screws started with my fingers here so this thing doesn't flop around. And so to do this 7mm offset, we're going to use the larger offset bracket on what they call the north side of the top of the CPU socket here. And we're going to go ahead and just tighten those down gently for now. And then we're going to use the smaller bracket here on the bottom side and rinse and repeat. I have to just ask it, and I'm not condoning it in any way, form, or fashion, but one of the things I vividly remember, two things I vividly remember from my Packard Bell 486 days, besides playing with Microsoft QBasic and trying to make little sounds and make little games, and you know, the only time I ever really took a little stab at programming, and I mean when I say little stab, that's what I mean. I mean I really wasn't definitely not a programmer in any way, form, or fashion. But the other thing that I did is, of course, people shared software a little bit, and I'll switch back over here and we can talk for a moment while I'm getting these tightened down the rest of the way. I remember I had this program that I got on a floppy disk that would show the stars in the like in the night sky and you could put in a date and a time and what hemisphere you were in and where you were located at, and it would show you exactly what the stars, where they would be oriented, where they would be at in the sky based on your location and the date and the time. So you could even go like 15 years in the future and it would show you where the stars would be. And that was pretty cool because, I mean, this is back, in the early 1990s, like, or mid 90s, and that was pretty cool. And the other thing that maybe some of you remember, and again, this is the one I'm definitely not condoning, and hopefully doesn't get any strikes on the channel or anything, but you remember the Jolly Rogers cookbook, the Anarchist cookbook? That thing was circulating in the early 90s on floppy disk, certainly before I had any semblance of internet. I didn't have any dial-up internet till I custom built my first tower computer about a year later, about 14 or 15 years old when I did that. And I'll tell that story here in a moment. And so that Anarchist cookbook was rather interesting. So I'll just leave it at that. If you don't know what it is, well, you're just a little too young to know anything, I guess. I'm just kidding. No, I definitely think the young people have got some good things going. I think I love the direction we're seeing technology going. Some really cool, innovative stuff happening. I think AI is pretty cool. I know some people are kind of scared about AI. I'm not really scared of it. I think we don't really know what all that's going to mean yet. I definitely think it's the biggest change that's happened in the computer world and technology, and probably in my lifetime, I would say. It's a pretty big deal. Okay. Wow, we got that done. And now I'm going to go ahead and just take one more Q-tip and kind of clean that off a little bit one more time. Not on the heat sink, just on the heat spreader on the CPU there. Let's kind of go over that a little bit since I was all working in that area. Just making sure it's good and clean. Because that's just how I am. Okay, now let's put some thermal paste on there. And I'm trying to remember, but I think, unless I'm mistaken, it does. So, pretty cool. Right here in the manual for this Noctua heatsink, and I'll zoom in with the other camera here, which is the crappier camera, but still yet. You'll be able to see right here, it tells you if you have AM4 or if you have AM5, here's the recommended pattern of how to put your thermal paste on there. So now I have to remember where I put the thermal paste. So that ought to be interesting. Here it is over here. So this is some of the Noctua NTH1 thermal paste. And I don't know if that's the one that I already have open. I thought I had the H2 thermal paste. I'm going to go over here and look in another area. I'm going to walk off screen for a second and look and see, because I think I already had a thing of thermal paste that was already open, but I could be wrong about that. NTH1, 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 yeah, there it is. Is this it? Found it. Okay. It does come with thermal paste, but I'm just trying to be consistent and using the same stuff and for all three servers. And so we're going to put it on here based on the pattern that they show. They show small dots kind of in the corners and then one big dot in the middle. And again, this doesn't have to, it's not an exact science. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just want to do the best you can, and because you're just wanting to have a good amount of heat transfer. You don't want too much thermal paste, though. That can be a problem. And again, this is going to be a little bit of a more sloppier job. I've learned through the years that it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't want too much, but also, you'd be surprised at how well it actually does. So, again, I got that dot a little bit farther back there than I wanted to. Want it kind of more toward the corner there. And that didn't work very good. It kind of got messy trying to move it. Okay. There's our pattern. It's not perfect, it's not pretty, but it ought to work. It's probably more than I needed for sure. It's probably the most I put on any of these, but that's okay. It should not be conductive and it should do the trick. And you're better off to have too much than not enough with thermal paste. But again, I like to have the exact perfect amount. I don't like to overdo it. Probably got more on this one than I did on the others, but that's, again, I'm just going to go with it. My perfectionist in me wants me to redo it, but I'm not going to do that. So, alright, so here we go. We're going to line up this heat sink the best we can. So when we get it there, we're not moving around too much. And we're going to set this down. Try to get it right where it needs to be. I'm going to get my head right in the camera here to make sure I'm lined up good. Okay, we're right there. We're going to get these screws started. You can go right through the heat sink. That one's not getting started very good. Oh, we shifted somehow. How did that happen? Kind of shifted off angle there a little bit. Probably not good. Might not have real good distribution of our thermal paste. Maybe not as good as we could. It kind of got a little bit crooked there on us, but again, things happen sometimes. And then I'm tightening it down all on one side. It's just going kind of not as good as I'd like it to. And again, I know you probably don't care to hear all that, but and I finally get that started. I don't think that one's getting started on that side for some reason. Okay, I'm going to switch the camera back over, just so you're not looking at my balding head. And I'm going to go ahead and loosen this side up a little bit more. And then I'm going to see if I can tighten this side down like it needs to be, so I can at least get it started. There we go. Now we've got it started. Now we can tighten down both sides kind of evenly, kind of go back and forth across, try to get them both evenly. Again, that did not go as well as I would have liked to. We got it lined up there and we're tightening it down now. These have the right amount of tension that you need when they're fully tightened. So you don't have to cinch down real hard. You just want to go till it stops, basically. When you get to that point, you know that it's tight, you know it's going to be what it needs to be there. And so you don't have to give it the beans, if you will. You can just tighten it down till it stops tightening and you're good to go. So I've got it just about there. Okay, that side's all the way. That side's all the way. I'll check this side again. I'll check this side again. Okay. Tight and good. Should be good and centered on there. Now we can take our cable. They kind of just crammed in there. We can twist that and we get that plugged into our motherboard header over here. We'll mess around and be able to power this thing up here in a minute if we want to. Alright, so there we go with that. And we can cable manage that a little bit better later if we want to. Kind of keep that up here out of the way. Again, making sure we're going to keep good airflow. Don't want to impede our airflow at all. Kind of put it about like that. We can work on these later. Okay, so heatsink is mounted. What I have noticed about this particular model, because the way the heatsink, the heat pipes, what makes contact with the processor, and the heat pipes and then the heat sink, they're kind of separated. I've noticed that usually when you mount it to the motherboard, the heat sink itself doesn't seem to be perfectly square, nor does it necessarily seem to be perfectly flat. It seems like it's kind of a little bit of an angle, and so it's not really anything to be alarmed about or worry about too much. It's just it's gonna, like for my example with this particular build, it kind of makes it really close to these memory modules over here. So I kind of just tweaking that a little bit there. See if I can get that a little more flat. And anyway, there we go. Good deal. I'm going to make sure these are tight. Let's drop the screw in there. Tight on that side. Tight on that side. Okay. So what's next? What do we want to do next? Let's go ahead and get these SATA hard drives in over here, because that's going to take a little bit of work to get all this kind of cable managed properly and get that all in here like we want it. So let's work on that next. So we'll go ahead and get our hard drive tray ready. And I'm getting tired, folks. It's getting late. If you're still with me, you're a brave person. I don't know if you're brave, you're just crazy maybe. Okay, so we got the little hard drive tray here that we're going to use to mount our two solid state drives in there. They're over here off camera. I'm going to grab those real quick. In fact, I'll grab all the solid state drives. Look at all these NVMe drives. Just NVMe drives galore. We got all these 4 terabyte NVMe drives. We got a couple 1 terabyte NVMe drives. And we've got these two Samsung 870 QVO 8 terabyte drives we're going to put in here kind of as our backup storage. Again, no database or production stuff going to be running on these. Use them for Veeam backup, scratch space, stuff like that. And I mentioned in the previous video that, you know, I usually have Synology NAS or some other target offsite, kind of off to back things up to, and even strive to have cloud backup when possible. Sometimes that can be a little challenging on your internet speed and where things are at. But these drives, although they're QLC NAND, and they're not going to have quite the right longevity that some other drives have, these should still do just fine for what I need them for, since they're not going to be written to constantly, and they're not going to be filled up for a long time. So, okay, I'm putting these boxes up get them a little bit out of the way there. And here we go. Samsung 870 QVO. And what's interesting about this, since I kind of have the chassis right in front of me, kind of makes it interesting to try to show you what else I'm working on here. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the other camera though, because it's probably still a little bit easier to tell what I'm doing. It came with these little packages of screws, and they're taped up. It's kind of weird how they did this. They kind of have the plastic, kind of have it taped up. You got to use a knife or something to kind of cut that tape to get to the screws. Two of the little bags have screws. I guess I can go back here while we're waiting. Two of the bags have the kind of screws that are for the actual solid state drives, to mount those to the hard drive caddy. And then the last little bag has screws that are for the mounting the actual caddy or the tray to the caddy. Caddies, trays, too many things. Okay, well, I guess while I'm doing these, you know, a little bit less exciting things, you know, and trying to, you know, pry on heat sinks and probably mess them up when I did that earlier. Hopefully not. I'm just trying to kind of flatten that out a little bit. Let's talk about my first custom PC build. I was about 14 or 15 years old. I think I was 15 maybe. And I built what would be the equivalent of a Pentium MMX. I believe the one I built was it was either 100 megahertz or 133 megahertz. I can't remember for 100% sure. It's been a long time ago. But it was an AMD processor. And I don't recall if that was the K5 series. I believe that was for a socket 7 motherboard, but don't hold me to that. But I do know, in fact, I don't believe it was probably, I'm pretty sure that predates socket 7 by a lot. I don't remember what the socket was. I think socket 7 came a lot later. I'm not sure of that now that I think about it. But I know that it was like an AMD, something like a K5, 133 megahertz AMD processor. And I don't recall exactly how much memory I had in it, nor do I really recall much about the hard drive. I do know later I bought a hard drive that was a 2.2 gigabyte hard drive, and just to show you how expensive things were and how much things have changed, a 2 gigabyte hard drive cost me like $200, like $250 for a 2 gigabyte hard drive. So I remember I ran Windows 2000 on it for a long time. You know, I also ran Windows 95, Windows 98, tinkered with Windows 2000 on that system. I also got into dial-up internet around that time. Of course, finally got a CD-ROM drive and kind of got to the common era a little bit. And good times, great oldies. It was fun times, and I think back fondly at those memories of building my first PC. You know, if you want more information about that, you can watch the previous video. We talked about some pretty cool stuff. I had some funny stories to tell, if you will, and I guess I'll share one of those, and it'll be redundant, I guess, for those who've already watched. But whenever, because there's really not much to what I'm doing here, I'm literally mounting two of these 2.5-inch laptop size Samsung SSDs into a tray that will allow it to be mounted in like a 3.5-inch hard drive kind of tray style here. So I'm just literally mounting these SSDs in here. Not much to see, not very exciting, so I'm just going to talk while I'm doing that. But when I was looking for motherboards, and by the way, a lot of times you use catalogs in order to order those kind of things. This was really back when the internet was more in its infancy, and you know there wasn't nearly as many stores. Tiger Direct came about a little bit later, and of course, a lot of you don't even know what Tiger Direct is. Tiger Direct's kind of a precursor to the Newegg of the day, and I miss Tiger Direct. You know, they were around until just a few years ago, and then they got bought out, and then they got shut down, and it's kind of sad because used to get Tiger Direct catalogs in the mail every month, and you know, it was like a kid in a candy store looking at all the stuff that I couldn't afford to buy. But before Tiger Direct, there was other catalogs, PC Magazine or Gamer Mag. I don't know what they all were. I mean, that's too many years ago. I don't remember it very well. But I remember the motherboard manufacturer that I chose, which would not be one you probably ever heard of. I don't remember the name of it, actually. It wasn't A-Bit or something like that, because I know they went out of business, and they made good boards, and I had some A-Bit boards back in the day. But whatever brand it was, they went out of business eventually. But they had, in their catalog, the board I was looking at, it touted that it had universal serial bus. Now this is back in the day of AT motherboards, before ATX was actually a standard, and so you didn't have all your connections directly on the motherboard like you do now. You know, now you've got, you know, all these things come directly off the board, and back in those days everything was just your COM port, your 9-pin serial port, and your parallel port and everything else. They all came off riser pins with a cable, and it would go to a cutout on the back of the case. And the only thing directly off the motherboard was the AT connector for the keyboard. It was like a little DIN style, little round nickel-sized connector for a keyboard. If you got an old IBM keyboard, one of those old mechanical ones, if you love those mechanical keyboards, those retro ones, you probably have an adapter that adapts that DIN style to a more modern connection, like maybe to a PS2 port or maybe even to USB. But at any rate, it was touted as having universal serial bus, and I didn't know what that was, and it was a new thing. And nothing was USB in those days. I mean, your printer was parallel. Your mouse was either the DIN connector or maybe it was PS2, and you know, there was nothing that really used USB. So I called the motherboard manufacturer and I asked him. I said, "Hey, I see it advertises that, you know, that the motherboard has universal serial bus. What is that? What is that?" And they said, "Oh, well, that's going to replace all those other ports, like your COM port, your parallel port. It's going to be a universal serial bus." And I remember very vividly saying, "Well, that'll never catch on." And boy, was I wrong about that one. Everything is USB now, and you know, you don't, and USB can emulate almost any other kind of standard. I mean, think about with USB-C, you can pass DisplayPort connections to USB-C. You can pass Thunderbolt through USB-C. There's so many protocols that can run through that physical connection. And the speeds are so much faster now, but you know, but it's interesting to think about. You know, it's hard to believe there was ever a time before USB, but there was, and so I really enjoyed, you know, custom building my first computer, and it was quite an adventure, especially for a young kid who was broke and poor, and you know, just had to scrimp and save and. You know, buy a part and wait to buy the next part, and but it sure made it exciting when it finally all came together. And so I know I'm kind of rambling on about that, but it's because I'm just basically putting these drives in this caddy, and I know nobody really cares about that. So what we'll try to do to make this a little more exciting, even though we don't have our bifurcated cards and stuff in there yet. We may cut to getting this thing to boot up here in a few minutes, just to see if what we did, if it worked. So give me a few minutes to get these drives mounted, and then we'll try to boot this thing up and see what happens. And that way we won't bore you to tears, which I'm already doing, I know. So, and trying to be too much of a perfectionist about the way I'm doing this. So in the comments, when you watch this video, put in what was your first computer. Maybe it was a Commodore 64. Maybe it was an Amiga. Maybe it was an IBM, you know, 25 megahertz, like a Packard Bell or something. Maybe it was an Apple Macintosh. Maybe it was an Apple II. Maybe your first computer also didn't have hardly any memory, or maybe it had no hard drive. Maybe all you had was 2 5 1/4 floppy drives. Tell me about some of your favorite games you played back in those days. I'd love to hear about that. It's always fun to share those kind of stories. Hey, and it's okay if your first computer that you ever owned, or the first one you ever built, was a socket AM4 AMD, or even a socket AM5, and you're just really you're just now getting into all this. Hey, I think that's great. I mean, you could turn this into a career just like I've done, and there's nothing better than to go to work every day and it doesn't feel like a job because you love to do it. And if you love technology and you love to learn new things, well then this would be a great thing for you to get into. Again, I'm just tightening these screws on this solid state drive off camera just because I'm getting tired, and call me lazy, I guess that's okay. And if you're still watching, I mean, you are a trooper. Probably need to prop your eyeballs open with something. Okay, so the two Samsung SSDs are mounted in this little caddy or tray. Now we're going to put that in the caddy, and then we're going to put the caddy in the case. So kind of a process there, but it's kind of a necessary evil, I guess you'd say. Just got to do it, and so we're going to go ahead and get that mounted in here. Get those screw holes to line up if I can. Oh, I'm kind of going in there a little bit of an angle, that's why. Okay, well, hope you've enjoyed kind of tagging along. Again, this is a different kind of format of a video, and definitely no frills, no bells and whistles, no flashiness. It's just a guy in a room building a computer, and it's just the raw facts. It's just it just is what it is. All right, so we'll get this mounted in here. That'd be a cool name of a YouTube channel. Just a guy in a room building computers. I don't know if there's a limit on how long the name of a YouTube channel can be, but hey, there's an option for channel number 2, right? For custom micro. I'm just kidding. We got a long way to go for channel number 1. I'm very thankful for the people who have tuned in and kind of been a part of this. Pretty awesome. And I'm going to double check something here to make sure this will fit fine. I want to make sure we're not going to be hitting anything, having any problems. No, that'll fit just fine. Kind of push that back as far as we can in that tray, that caddy. So 2 of these servers are going to the same doctor's office. I'm going to be setting those up in a failover cluster using Hyper-V. And I know that was a controversial statement maybe earlier, and you might think, oh, Hyper-V. You know, I know there's a lot of VMware fanboys, but good luck with that now that Broadcom's bought VMware and the price has gone sky high. And you know, if you work in the enterprise world and you're paying for VMware, but you're also paying for Microsoft data center licenses so you can run Windows VMs, well, why not just use Hyper-V? I've found that at my day job, when we transitioned from VMware to Hyper-V, I never look back. Don't miss it. Don't have any functionality that I don't have. You know, we're just rocking and rolling, and so you know, yeah, you could run something like Proxmox, and I'm not opposed to those open source options because they even do offer paid support and things with different tiers, and I may look into that more down the road, but for right now, I'm definitely fine with not having those things. I'm not, you know, really what it comes down to is I just haven't had time to really dive deep into Proxmox or some of the competitors out there, and I know some of you probably know all the names of them and probably test them all in your lab environment, but you know, when you have a career and a side job and a family and you have all these things, sometimes you just don't have the time to do all that. Now what I'm doing right now is I am taking the 2 screws out of the bottom there that we're holding this fan in place, because it's going to make it a little bit easier for me to get, and I'm just going to probably unplug this as well, or maybe just sit it here. It's going to make it a little bit easier to get this installed, because there's this one screw over here that's kind of a pain to get to if that fan is in place. So now I won't have any problem at all. It'll be very easy to get to. I do think I dropped a screw. There it is. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get this caddy screwed in here. All right, let's see. Drop the screwdriver. Getting tired. Ready to fire this thing up. It did kind of put a little pressure on me to get this thing cranking and get it done, because I've been kind of dragging my feet on getting this done, but I've been needing to get it done. I'm going to take a look here, make sure. Looks like there's 2 different lengths of these screws. I could be wrong about that, but just make sure I'm grabbing the ones that are the right length. For some reason this tray, the screw holes on this side aren't really lining up very good. Let me see if I can switch the camera back over, and I don't know if you can really see that, but basically on this side of the caddy, these screw holes are not lining up real well. Hopefully I can get them in there good enough. Here's one. One more to go right here. And we'll get that tightened down, and we'll be off to the races, as they say. Okay, so we've got our cables. Look like they're going through there okay. Don't want them to be rubbing against that metal though, so I'm going to probably kind of adjust them a little bit here. See if we can make sure they're not going to be up against that. I do need to still get this power supply screwed down in here, because it's still loose. Alright, now I need to get this fan back in here. You can't see that, can you? It's off camera. I just think my other camera died. Stand by for just a moment. I think the battery on my other camera died. And it did, so we're going to put on some hold music, and I'm going to run and grab a power brick and get that thing going again. We've been going a while now. Let's get the music going. Here we go. Okay, we are back again, and I'm going to get this music off. We're live. Okay, so went ahead and slapped a monitor up here on the table. We'll take a look in a minute if we can get this thing booted up. But definitely got myself distracted when I realized that this camera had turned off. And so let's go ahead. I'm going to finish getting and get this fan mounted back in there before I forget to do it. Get us to a good spot where we can go ahead and get this thing fired back up. I'm going to have to kind of do this at a weird angle because I don't really want to put too much pressure on this. So I'll get one screw started. Get this other one started here. Alright. Let's get this fan mounted back in there. We can always tighten these down a little more later. We're putting that front panel back on there. Alright, again, y'all are troopers. Hang in here as long as you have. Alright, that worked out pretty good. Still not 100% sure I like some of the cable management right along here. Okay. It's kind of rubbing, and I don't want it to rub through that cable. I don't feel like it was rubbing like that on the other two servers, but maybe it was. It's not really rubbing too bad. I think I can tolerate that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and swing this around and get this power supply secured because it's still just loose. See if we can find the right screws for that. Probably were in the box for the power supply. If not, I'm sure I've got some that'll work. In fact, I know I do, but I'm just trying to remember where everything is. Let's go ahead and transition back over here. Got things kind of spun around, so I can just screw that on there. I'm not going to waste much time looking for those screws. There's just boxes everywhere. Probably was a special little thing of screws. There we go, found it. Found the screws that came with the power supply. They got a little bit different thread pattern than the ones that we use to mount the motherboard and things like that, so we make sure we use the right thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, there's not much to see there, so I'll switch back over to this view. And I know you cannot see, but it's super easy just to mount this power supply. You couldn't really ask for an easier case to mount a power supply in than one of these little 2U server chassis. Silverstone makes a pretty shallow 2U chassis that has a option for a redundant power supply, and that may be something you want to consider if you think that that's something important to you. I'm normally all for that, but basically it's very price prohibitive. The Silverstone case and the power supplies are really expensive, and that would have shot the price of this up even more, and it's already an expensive build. So I just decided to, you know, as long as you got a power supply kind of waiting in the wings as a spare, if something happens, you're good to, you know, just come swap it out. And plus, because this one's going to be in a failover cluster, if one host completely dies, well, then you just get up and go. You know, you just keep rocking and rolling. You don't miss a beat if you done it right. So, okay. Again, some of the cable management can be redone and done a little bit nicer later. As I know right now, we got to get to the place where we're doing some testing. So let's see, what else should we do before we fire this thing up? I know one thing we need to do is I need to go ahead and get the front panel on there so we can plug up the front panel connectors. That's something you can watch. That's something that's not very fun, but very necessary. You can just short the pins on the board and that kind of thing, but hey, I'm building this server, and it's, as much as I'm making a video, I'm building a server, so I'm going to go ahead and put this front panel back on here. The newer models, I think, have 2 USB 3s. This one has one USB 3 and one USB A. And so, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and try to do a better cable management job on these. I'm going to try to run these underneath these power supply cables, the ATX cable, and those 8-pin cables. Kind of run that under there. We got our USB 3. It's got that special connector, special header there. And we got our USB 2 and our front panel header cable. Run that through there. Kind of easily feed that through, and then bring this on up here. You just want to make sure you don't get any of that on the sharp edge of anything. You don't want to cut any of these and have a problem with that. Just taking a look here, make sure everything looks good. Sure we're not getting stuck on anything. Okay. So we got the front panel header here. We've got USB 2, USB 3, and all that. But before we get any further, I need to go ahead and at least get this front panel partially secured. Some of these bigger screws on the side here, and some smaller screws on the bottom. Oh, don't want to forget the ears. Somebody asks, you got your ears on? We got to make sure we got our rack ears on. We don't want to have a problem later. Actually, let me make sure this is the right screw. That is not the right screw. Accidentally grabbed some of the fan screws. One of these here. And then dropping everything. Maybe the most cringe IT video you've watched in a while. If you're just tuning in, we've been a couple hours into this server build, and things are going pretty good, but I'm getting tired and don't want to start making mistakes for sure. Don't want to start getting sloppy with it. So I'm just going to try to keep my focus for the next little bit. Kick this thing on in the driveway and get it done. Again, one of the biggest issues is where'd all my screws go for this. Because I've got such a variety of them. one of my colleagues suggested I just do a voiceover for this build, and that probably would have been a lot more polished, but it would have taken a lot more time, and time is something I don't have much of, so that's honestly why we didn't put out a video for well over a year, is just because I've just been so very busy. And that's a good thing, but I really wanted to put out some more content, so I'm glad we're finally doing that. Just kind of making sure things are still working too. Keep on glancing over, making sure the microphone battery hasn't died. I'm just sitting here doing some Milli Vanilli. Hope the volume's good enough, because I'm just so tired I can't hardly talk right. Anyway, I don't want to keep talking about how tired I am. That ain't no fun. So let's just keep on keeping on. Again, I don't have to necessarily get this fully secured in order for us to power this up. But I am missing one more of these side screws, these larger screws. Where could it be? There it is. Found it. And then there's some screws that go on the bottom edge. We need to get those going as well before we tighten everything down. So I'm going to tilt this up on its edge. And then we're going to put these screws in this bottom edge here. Again, I got to do it, and you're along for the ride, good, bad, or ugly. Like even the drudgery, even the unfun parts. All right. So far, so good. Those bottom screws are in. Set this back down again. And then finish tightening these down on the side here. And again, I'm going to probably cinch these down a little more later, because this is important, because it's what's holding the whole thing up when you mount it in a cabinet or in a rack. So you definitely don't want these to be loose. But also you don't want to over tighten them, because I have done that before. Guilty as charged, kind of as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these other cables plugged in. We've got this USB 3. I'm going to kind of feed it down through here. I think this is a good opportunity to switch back to our other camera. And maybe I can bring it here a little bit closer, because I think over time we have kind of got a little bit off center there. And I mean, everything is showing up. We got all the junk in the floor, everything. Okay, so I'm basically kind of feeding this cable back here underneath some of this stuff, kind of out of the way. And then you could also feed these cables up underneath the hard drive tray area. And I think on one of the other servers I did that as well. As long as you know you have good airflow and you kind of keep all these cables out of the way, either option is fine. You just don't want it to be, you know, like I said, impeding airflow. So we'll plug that in. Again, I may do some different cable management with it later. Then we got our front panel header there. No, actually this is our USB header, isn't it? Nope, that's our front panel. This, where's our, oh, it's tied together, I see. Weird. We've got the USB 2 and the some of the other headers are all there mixed together. Maybe I can feed this back underneath there. Alright, well anyway, you just want to see this thing fire up, so let's do that. Let's just get this thing where we can power it up real quick. All we need is the power button. Power switch. Find where that's going to go. It's hard to see with the lighting here. Which one's power and which one's reset. The light's just reflecting off of everything. Alright. Let's see if our little motherboard cheat sheet tells us which one's which. Of course it doesn't. You have to have the motherboard manual for that, apparently. I could be wrong, but I think, if I remember right on the other ones, and I might take a sneak peek, I think the power button is just going to go right here. I think that's where the power button goes. And that's really all we need to hook up. So I'm going to go over here and grab a power cord and hook it up to this monitor and try to swing this around so you can see it, and we'll see if this thing will come to life. Hopefully it will. Trying to get this these cables untangled. I've got like a VGA and a HDMI on this monitor. It's not a very snazzy monitor. It's an old Samsung, like a 19-inch. Definitely not 1080p, but it doesn't matter for an old server like this. So again, we'll get these solid-state drives put in later. But we're going to see if this thing will boot up. Okay, monitor in. Grab a power cord down here. Plug the power in. Flip the power on. Going to grab mouse receiver, plug in one of the USB ports. Check. And I think I got the keyboard and mouse over here, off camera. Okay, so here we go. Will she power up? That is the question. After all that we've done, did we do it right? Will it work? Let's power it up and see. Oh, that's probably not the right place for the pins there for the power button. Maybe it's over here. Again, it's really hard to tell. See if that's it. There we go. Alright, let's see what happens. Let me make sure this monitor is powered up. That would be helpful. I think the monitor is plugged in. Yep. Make sure it's powered on. Oh, it was, and I turned it off. That's how that goes. There we go. Hey, look at that. We've got video. It's alive. I don't know if if it's completely through booting up. As far as the out-of-band management chip, the A-speed chip, takes a while sometimes as it's booting up. And then the first time you boot up a Ryzen Zen 4 or any kind of modern AMD platform, a lot of times it's basically initializing the memory. I guess it's kind of I think they call it learning the memory. It's kind of there's 96 gigs of memory in this thing, so it's kind of taking a minute to learn the memory. And so it's going to go through some process here. But yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. Hey, if we can get to the BIOS screen here in a minute, we'll be doing really good. I press delete and I can't even really see the screen. Y'all can see it. I'm looking through the camera at it. Again, it's probably learning the memory right now. So we have to be patient. Can we be patient? That is the question. Here we go. Let me take a look and see what that message says. I think it says something about a new processor being installed. Let's see. New CPU installed. Press Y to reset. If you have So, yep, we're going to press Y because we know it's a new processor and we're good with that. So we'll come down here. We'll press Y. And then we should be getting the BIOS here in a moment. Probably after another power cycle, it looks like. All right. While we're waiting on that, I'm going to check something real quick. Boy, we've been at it almost 3 hours here, folks. 2 hours and 47 minutes. Wow. This is a long form video for sure. But we've went from start to finish and we've built a server, so that's pretty cool. We get into the BIOS, that's even better. We got to set that 16x PCIe slot to be bifurcated. We need to do that for sure. Everything feels nice and cool. Air's flowing through the fans. And there's the BIOS screen. We made it. Would you look at that? All right, that's good. That's a good win. We made it to the BIOS screen. So, success. We booted up. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and make a couple changes in the BIOS, and then we'll go from there. I know the way the camera is, it may be difficult to show you. What I'm going to do, just to see how this will work, I'm going to switch back to this camera. Then I'm going to switch this around, get some stuff out of the way. Move this monitor around so I can see it, so I can read it. Okay, I can see it now. I can see clearly now. So what I'm going to try to do, switch back over here, let's see if I move this camera around, if I can pick up what's on this screen enough that we can go through this together. That'd be pretty cool. I may actually take this box out of the way. May grab a little bit of a shorter box. Now that kind of looks weird too. It's kind of like a top-down kind of view, or a bottom-up kind of view, I guess would be a better way to put that. Let's see. what do we do this? What if we put one more thing underneath it? That's better. I think we can live with that. Bring this back just a little bit so we don't miss anything. I know it'll kind of be hard to see that. It's not perfect. But there we go. It's certainly not a screen capture, but you can probably barely make out what it says on the screen. Maybe I can read it a little bit better. So you notice there, if we go to motherboard information, we've got some information there about the board. It is that B650D4U-2L2T/BCM ASRock rack board. Processor information, that AMD Ryzen 9 7950X 16-core processor. And it's got that base clock of 4.5 gigahertz, the boost clock of 5.7. And then our memory information, we do have those two 48 gig sticks of ECC unbuffered DIMM. And hopefully once we get the BIOS update on this system, it'll show us 5600 megahertz. I believe on the other boards it did. But what I want to do for now is do a couple things. We'll look at the hardware monitor, make sure our CPU looks like it's running cool enough. So I kind of tweaked on that heatsink a little more than I would have liked to, trying to kind of get that straightened out a little bit. And let's see what we got here. Okay, temp CPU 50 degrees C, memory is about 33 C, motherboard's 29 C. That all looks about nominal and normal, I believe, for this AMD Zen 4 platform. So we're going to go ahead and escape out of that. Now I just have to remember where the bifurcated settings are at. We've got virtualization enabled, which we'll definitely need that. Don't have anything. The SATA drives aren't connected yet. No NVMe drives found. None of that stuff. I believe is it under here? No. Resizable bars enabled. We really don't care about that too much. We're not really doing anything with the graphics. We'll go ahead and enable the virtualization support for the low-level stuff. Even though may not be able to support it completely. Here we go. The PCIe lanes configuration. We want to set that to be 4x4x4x4x4. So that's going to change that 16x slot into 4 4x slots, basically. And we can use that bifurcated card now. That's the main thing we wanted to change. Later on, we'll come in and set the IP address for the out-of-band management and all those kind of things. But for now, we're going to save changes and exit. And then we're going to power this thing off, and I'm going to put this bifurcated card in here. Definitely has, out of the motherboards that I've got, I think this has maybe the oldest BIOS version. We definitely need to get that upgraded to the latest. Okay, we're back in the BIOS, so I'm going to power this thing off. And then we'll get our cameras all situated again. And I'm going to go ahead and put that bifurcated card in with all those NVMe drives, because we're going to keep rocking and rolling, folks. This is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. And we're going to go ahead and get this other camera set up over here again so we can see everything. At least a pretty decent view of it. Kind of a front down shot there. Hopefully that's good and stable. Surely don't want that falling and breaking something, do we? I realize there's just so much junk in the background there on the floor. All the stuff that we've taken down. All the boxes, basically. Okay, so next thing we're going to work on is putting these little guys in. I'm going to have some fun with that. So we've got these two riser cards. We've got one that goes in the 16X slot. We've got one that goes into the 4X slot. And this one that goes in the 16X slot, actually, we're going to have to remove one of these blanks out of the back. Be careful not to ground anything out. Be careful. And then this bifurcated 16X card comes with the normal. It doesn't come with the normal. It comes with a normal height bracket. We need to install the low profile bracket on there. So I'm going to work on that right now. Again, some of this stuff really doesn't need to be necessarily on camera. I'm just going to work on it however it's convenient and easy to do, because changing out this bracket is one of the simplest things you're going to do on the entire project. I know I'm getting tired. If you like the long form video, let me know. If you don't like it, let me know. I may not ever want to do another one of these again. But no, I enjoy bringing you along for the ride with me. And it's always fun doing this kind of thing. It is more difficult to do when you've got people watching. It's kind of a little more pressure, but hey, it's okay. I can work under pressure a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and scoot this server back this way a little bit. Gives me a little bit of tabletop space here to help me get this screw started over here on this low profile bracket. All right, so of course, when we go back in time as I'm talking about all this stuff and we're reminiscing and remembering things, I'm reminded about the time of that first computer I built, about the time of dial-up internet. I remember downloading MP3s. I don't condone that, but I did that back in those days, and kind of show my age a little bit again. Back before Napster, back before LimeWire, back before any of those kind of services, people downloaded MP3s from FTP servers. That's right, folks. Your old school FTP server. And the way it worked is there was an honor system to a certain degree, but you would upload a MP3 to the server, and for every upload you would get a certain number of downloads. Like, so it might be based on size or maybe based on the number of songs. So you upload one song, you can download 3 or something like that. Or you upload 10 megabytes, you can, well, that'd be a lot, but let's say you download you upload 3 or 5 megabytes, and you can download maybe 10 or 15. I don't know. I think it was based more on the number than the size. But anyway, I know that's kind of a crazy thought when you think about it, that, but that's the way it worked. And I think that was actually pretty clever back in those days. I'm actually not sure how how the FTP server was able to do that, looking back. Pretty innovative for the time. If you ran one of those FTP servers back then, hey, leave a comment. I'd love to know how it was able to know that you uploaded a file and you were able to then download files. And everybody wanted to upload their crummiest MP3, like the little short song that didn't take up much space, so you could take your time to download all the good songs. But again, I don't condone that at all. Haven't done that kind of stuff in decades, but that was common back in those days. At this point, I'm sure, nobody cares about what happened back in 1995, probably. So, definitely like 20 years ago. In fact, it's longer than that. It's like 30 years ago. Wow. Isn't that crazy? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure I put the right ones in the right place, because that would be bad. The 4 terabyte drives are going on this riser card, and one of the 1 terabyte drives goes on this little tiny baby riser card. I'm going to do that one first. And you can see a little bit better now, I think, from this view. Oops, sorry about that. Here's our 16X card that's going to have 4 NVMe drives, 2 on the front, 2 on the back there. You know what I just realized? Silly, silly me. I put this on upside down. Kind of stuff happens sometimes. Don't make fun of me too much. Coming off camera here just so I can get these screws loosened, and then I can put it back in view to do the rest. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning whenever you're putting on this backwards, so that's okay. It won't take much to send it back around the right way. Be glad to fix that. If you've never used one of these cards, I mentioned in my previous video when I talked about the components I chose, that you need to be very careful about what you pick for these, because not all bifurcated cards are made equal. Some of them don't perform very well at all. Some of them are very quirky and buggy, and I know I bought one off Amazon that was like JEYI, and I had stability problems with it. Blue screens, server randomly rebooting. There was not this server, it was a socket AM4 previous generation. But still, ASRock Rack did have a bifurcated 4x4x4x4x4 16X card, but at the time that I purchased all this equipment, which I'm sad to admit was back in November of last year, they did not have that card in stock anywhere. It looked like they were probably phasing them out, and so because they were phasing them out, I had to look elsewhere. So I found these, I believe the brand is Link Reel. I'm going to verify that in just a moment. But these have been really good cards. You can tell they're good quality components and things. Yeah, Link Reel. And so you can't find all of the Link Reel options on Amazon or Newegg. I had to go to AliExpress to get these exact models, their latest and greatest, because this is a 16X card, and it's PCI 4.0 standard. This is the single riser card that will go in that 4X slot. So I'm going to go ahead. There's these little perforated parts here that we need to break off. We won't need those parts on the board. And it's a little bit scary, a little bit of a scary feeling when you're going to be breaking something off of a printed circuit board. but it's designed to do that. If you don't need that part, which we do not. Okay, there it is. Move it over here. Okay, so we got our two 1 terabyte drives. We'll open one of those up, and we'll do that. This comes with a little, kind of a weird mounting on this one, on this single riser, and it's just a very different kind of mount. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it very well. It's not your normal screw and standoff. It is a screw and a standoff, but you actually have to kind of wedge the standoff around the NVMe drive, and then you run the screw in from the back side. So it's definitely different, I would say. So we'll go ahead and get this drive in there. Oh, I forgot. Just said that, and then I forgot to do it. Got to make sure we put the little standoff. It slides. It has like a little groove, and it literally slides onto the drive. Then we'll pop the drive in there. Nice little snap there. Then we'll take our screw. The screw comes in from the bottom side. Hopefully it'll thread on there okay. Doesn't seem like it wants to. Need a little persnickety. Okay. Well, this is not really screwing on there very good for some reason. Kind of went off camera here so I can hold it a little bit better. I was being careful not to cross thread the screw or anything. Even backed it off a couple times and kind of got another shot at it, another stab at it. The screw is not really happy though. It definitely is not wanting to go in or out. And I never had this problem on the other ones. That's weird. Weird, weird, weird. I feel like there's just something wrong with this screw, or maybe there's something wrong with this standoff. Okay, well, didn't know we hit a snag like this. I've got the needle nose pliers. I can hold the standoff from being able to spin. I can get this thing off there if I need to, which I definitely need to. I just don't understand really what happened. I feel like those threads on that screw are messing up for some reason. I don't know if that standoff has just got a problem. I'm going to take this, now that I got it off there, I'll try to run this screw in and out of the standoff a few times. See if we can work it through there, figure out what's going on. It's got some very, very fine threads. So maybe it's got a boogered up spot on it. Maybe it's got a problem there. Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel right. I think there's something wrong with that. I think I have an extra one of these somewhere. I bought a 5-pack of these single cards. Let me go take a little look, see if I can find one of the others. Well, you can hear me rummaging around back here. I'm trying to find one of the spare cards, and I don't know where I put them. I don't think they're here on the table anywhere. Maybe they're in this box. Hey, here we go. I lost the standoff and the screw on one of them. I don't know what in the world happened to it. And so it's a good thing I had a 5-pack of these. So there's another standoff and screw here in this package. And we'll hope that that works. And I'll be very careful with the screw not to cross-thread it in any way. Makes me a little bit nervous. The first two of these, I didn't ever have any problem on the first two servers. But of course, you know, you get on this last server and it's 1 in the morning, then you're going to have problems, of course. Again, I may just kind of make sure it threads in there without any problems before we go ahead and put it in there. Okay, that is threading in there just fine. I could tell though it looked like it was going to hang up a little bit at first, so. Alright, we only need one, so, and this is the last server, so I only need one to finish out the project, so I can just make it, we'll be alright here. Okay, so. No whammies, as they say. Oh yeah, that's threading in there just fine. I think there was something wrong with that other standoff. Maybe when they machined it, they didn't do something right. Seen that kind of thing happen before. You may have seen something like that too. Alright, that is ready to go. We're going to go ahead and slap that in the board. Without further ado, as they say. Adieu, adieu to you and you and you. I'm probably getting a little bit delirious at this point, so if I act crazy or say silly things, don't mind me. Okay, there we go. One drive in. Hey, if we wanted to, we could put the other 1 terabyte drive in. I've got to find the little nut that comes with the motherboard. If I can find it. I have just lost everything today. So, with the motherboard, it comes with like a little thumb screw almost for the NVMe drive that goes on the board itself. And I am not seeing that. So this is why it's good to keep a clean workspace and do as I say, don't do as I do. Is that what people always say? Yeah, this screw here on this standoff is definitely messed up. Might be able to kind of force it through there and get it to work. There we go. So it's working a little bit now. Might be able to reuse that later. Put that over there. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just go off camera a little bit and go hunting because I have to find that thumb screw. I've got the motherboard box here. I don't see it in there. Looking in there, we got the piece of foam that came in it. We got the anti-static bag. That's what you hear rustling around right now. I'm putting a piece of foam back in the anti-static bag just to kind of clean up a little bit. I don't remember seeing the thumb screw whenever I unboxed the motherboard. I'm sure you love that crinkly sound. It's not annoying at all. It's even getting worse. And then you're just sitting there staring at a motherboard. Well, let's see. So far, not good. So far, no thumb screw has been found. And so I probably will give up in a moment and move on because that's the way it is. Okay. Well, I don't want you to have to sit there and stare at that, which you don't have to do anything. You can drop off anytime you need to. I'm going to take a look at the table here and see if maybe it's laying up here somewhere. Just a little bag, kind of like that, has a little black thumb screw in it. And I've got lots of screws around, so if I can't find that, I'm sure I can find a thumb screw, or not a thumb screw, I can find a screw that'll work. And just have to make sure it's the right thread pattern. And so yeah, fun times, folks. You gotta love it. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go ahead and build out the 4 terabyte drives on this riser card, and then we'll sign off and call this video done. And so let's do that right now. Let's go ahead and get these 4 terabyte drives in there. I want to make sure I'm not putting the 1 terabyte in there on accident because this is going to be done a certain way. So let's make sure, yep, that's the 1 terabyte drive. We've already got one of those in, so we'll hold off on that. That's going on the motherboard. So on this 4X card, it's a little bit different. The standoffs are already there. You just have to loosen the screws. And of course, as is my luck on this card, instead of just the screw coming out, the screw and the standoff came out. So I'm going to have to grab these nail nose pliers and keep some tension on it. Okay, that worked. Strange that it did that, but basically there's the screw, here's the standoff, and it's supposed to be in here. I don't know really why that came loose with the screw. Make sure that's tight. Okay, it seems like it's tight enough. Alright, back to where we were. Let's put a drive in. Alright, drive in. Grab a screw. That's why having a magnetic bit is so nice. You don't have to go running around chasing your screws unless you've lost them completely like I did on that other thing. So I'm just going to barely snug that, get the next screw ready, get another 4 terabyte drive opened up here, ready to go. course, another 4 terabyte drive ready. Nice little snap. I know some people buy the NVMe drives with heat sinks. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. They do cost more money, and I'm not really sure how effective they actually are. I will tighten those down a little bit more here in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and flip this around and get these other 2 screws loosened. Hopefully the standoffs don't come off with the screws again. That did much better. And now we need 2 more, the last 2 NVMe drives. Except for the one that goes in the motherboard that we can't do yet. And I set it over out of the way so it wouldn't get confused. Okay, drive number 3. Microphone still working? Yep. Guess this thing has a good battery. I don't know much about the quality of the mic, but hey, it's working. We're making a video. The rest is history. Here's 4 terabyte number 4 coming on down. The next contestant. Grab my screwdriver. Screw on there. Get this thing going here. Okay, those 4 drives are on that card now. I'm going to go ahead and off camera tighten them up just a little bit more. They don't really have to be too tight. You can never remind yourself enough when you're like me to not tighten things too much. You always need to remind yourself, don't tighten it too much. Don't strip it out. Alright, that one's snug. That one's snug. Make sure these 2 are snug. Snug. And stripped. Basically. One of the screws kind of stripped out a little bit. Happens sometimes. Got my greasy hand on there a little bit, but it should be okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and slap this in here. It'll make it a little more difficult to get that last NVMe drive in there, but it won't be too bad. I can handle it. So let's go ahead and get this card in. It'll be a little bit interesting. There's a little bit of an area here on these that you kind of have to fight. It's got this little bit of a lip right here. You kind of have to pry that in a little bit. It's kind of aggravating how they built that. With that little bit of a... There's not really a good way to pry that. There's enough flex in the case though. You can kind of push it out a little bit. Make sure we push this down on the 16X card, the little clip on the back of it there. Okay, now we got it so close. There we go. Pop right behind that. then come straight down with the card. We're in. Lock it in. Looking good. Look at that. We got a bifurcated card in there, folks. Pretty exciting stuff, huh? Okay, now, when I took that blank off there, I don't remember what I did with that screw, because those are particular types of screws. It's probably this screw right here. If I hunted the right one down. That looks like it's probably it. One thing I want to make sure that the card doesn't get slid too far that way, so it doesn't get bowed. We want it to be straight up and down, nice and good shape there. Looks like it's in pretty good shape. Didn't push too far over. Probably could straighten up a little better. Might loosen that off a little bit. See if I can slide it over any. Doesn't look like I really can. Let's try to keep a lot of pressure back there as I tighten it. There we go. Nice straight card. Okay, now we got to figure out what thread pattern we've got on this little post here for that M.2 drive on the motherboard, since we're going to have to use our own screw now. Let's see if that's the right one. That's it right there. Since we don't have the thumb screw, because the thumb screw is missing. Miss Nelson is missing. You remember that? Man, show my age again. Man, watching that on one of those little projectors, film projectors, in the 5th grade or 4th grade, 5th grade, whatever. Miss Nelson is missing. Some of y'all don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay. Get this in here. I like how everything I'm doing, my hands are right in the way of the camera. I am going to go around this side to do this, because the way I like to install NVMe drives, I like to kind of be with my, like to be right behind the socket there. Again, this would have been easier without that bifurcated card in there, but we were trying to keep moving along, you know. We were trying to keep making progress and not to get slowed down because of technical difficulties and stuff. Okay, so that's there. Let's put this screw in there. That's not the right screw for this, so we want to be careful with that. We don't want to short it out or something. So tighten it gingerly. That's good enough. Oh, sorry for that loud noise. All the stuff all over the floor everywhere. Okay, we got that thing loaded down. There are now 6 NVMe drives in this board. And pretty impressive, huh? Okay, so let's go ahead and get these 2 SATA drives connected. We'll go back in the BIOS and make sure it detected all these drives, and we'll talk about something related to that. And I'm going to grab a little drink of water. I'm getting very dry. Okay, well, while we're doing this, I'm going to switch back over here even if you see me digging around for stuff. I'm trying to remember where everything is at. Definitely need some power supply cables for SATA power or SATA power. Do you say SATA or SATA? For years I said SATA, and then everybody I was around always said SATA. So I kind of, I guess from a peer pressure perspective, I started saying SATA. So I don't know if there's really a right or wrong answer to that, but anyway. Alright, so what we're looking for is there's one of the cables in the box that just has 2 SATA connectors, and it plugs in modularly to the power supply because we only have 2 drives. So we use the shortest, smallest cable we can to take up the least amount of space and give us the best amount of cable management. And then we've got, yep, old school SATA cables. Yep. And they are what they are, right? And these I bought a long time ago, but they should be good. I'm trying to think. I think they have a brand on here or something. But again, the lighting is so bad. Might as well not even worry with it. Amphenol, that's what it is. These are branded Amphenol, and so they make good cables. And I think these are actually super micro cables. Found them on Amazon. You know, I know it might seem silly, but you want to make sure you've got good quality SATA cables. You don't want junk. And so I'm going to go ahead and we got these connectors right here on the edge of the board. We're going to go ahead and plug those in. I've been using the 2 closest to the board, so if I ever need to add something else later, I could. I don't know that I ever will, but if I wanted to, I could. And then we got our last SATA cable here. We had some very impressive performance out of those 4 terabyte NVMe drives, all in a storage spaces mirrored set. And if you want to see how fast those were, especially with like crazy sequential read and read speeds in particular, well, you have to go look at our other video. I know I keep saying that, but you're going to have to go check it out if you want to know more about it. So, alright, so now this is going to be the cable management fun. Trying to get these SATA cables back underneath this tray. Again, we're focused on airflow. We want to make sure we got optimal airflow. And it doesn't really matter which one plugs in where. For the most part. And I'll do some better cable management when we're done with this thing. For sure. Okay. Okay, that one kind of sits on top of the other one. So I guess that means we probably want to put this one up here. And then this one down here. And then again, the cable management can be dealt with a little better and a little more later. Make sure those are plugged in good. Get our power. And then we're going to fire this computer up again and make sure it's detecting our drives. It may not detect the SATA drives. It should detect the NVMe drives. I'll explain in a moment when we get in the BIOS why that is or why that might be. But it will detect them eventually. I guess I'll put it that way. it's not like it's never going to detect it, so it's not that bad. It's not that bad. Okay, here we go. What a little song about it. Want to hear it? Here it go. So I'll plug that in to the modular connector there. And then we got these two cables. We're going to, again, do this in the most eloquent way we can, because of the nature of the way they are. Let's see, probably come around this side. Maybe. I want to have power. Probably will work fine. Plug those in. They always feel like they're going in too tight. They're surely not going to fall out. And then plug this one in. And there we go. Again, from a cable management perspective, do what we can to get these kind of down in here. Not really sure how I did on the other server. I'll take a sneak peek later and take a look and see what I did, so I can make it look really nice and clean. Something like that. Give it a little top-down view. Probably should have been doing that the whole time. Should have pretty good airflow, pretty decent cable management. Okay, well, let's get the camera adjusted then, and we'll take a look. We're doing that weird super fast transition. Get this other camera set up here, the way we had it a moment ago. And I think we set on top of this box and on top of one of these, and got it about like that. Scoot it back a little bit. Here we go. I'm going to power this thing up. Now that we're loaded down with NVMe drives. Will we get? Make sure we find the keyboard. Where is it at? I got to hit the delete key. I got to hit the any key. I know I'm not talking, but it's because I'm tired. We're entering setup, and it's taking its sweet time. Will it detect the storage? That is the question. Will it blend? That is the question. Here we go. All right, the BIOS loaded. Hooray. Let's go into storage configuration. Hey, see, I told you. No SATA drives detected. That's what I expected to see. NVMe configuration, but check it out. All the NVMe drives were detected. The 4 terabytes and the 2 1 terabytes. So we're in great shape there. Now we just have to, well, I guess I owe you an explanation. So what I noticed on the other two servers with the shipping BIOS version on at least 2 of these boards For some reason, it does not detect the SATA drives, but when you do the firmware update, the BIOS update, then it does. So we'll have to do the firmware update, BIOS update on this in order for it to detect those two 8 terabyte Samsung QVO drives. All right then. Well, I think that's enough. I'm going to go ahead and switch back and sign out, sign off, sign something. If you stuck with me this long, you are a trooper and a half. We've been going, and I'm not making this up, for 3 hours and 41 minutes. If you're a glutton for punishment, yeah, you're in great shape. But hey, don't worry. We have 0 viewers right now. So that means nobody stuck with me for these 3 hours and 41 minutes, almost 42 minutes. But this has been Kevin with Custom Micro, raw and uncut and unedited, and building a server from scratch. I have a little bit of cleanup work left. Got to get the rest of the front panel header stuff plugged in and all that. And but other than that, hey, it worked. Powered up, everything's working as I expected it to. Thank the Lord for that. I would say, I've been saying it all through this video, you need to go back and check out the previous video where I discuss all the components I chose and why I chose them. And I think that'll be very helpful and informative. If you just jumped into this video directly, you probably need to go back and check that one out. So without further ado, because I'm done, this is Kevin with Custom Micro. We'll see you next time.